Chapter 2794. Oh, Xiaohua also came back to his senses and said in surprise, I gave Xiao Mao a lot of medicinal pills. Which one is senior brother talking about? It's the kind that is ugly and doesn't have any fragrance. It's used to heal injuries, Xiao Mao said. In the sword tomb array, senior brother Li was injured, and many of the elders in the meeting hall were also exhausted. Senior sister gave it to senior brother Li to take. In the end, senior brother Li took all the medicinal pills given by big brother and gave them to the gold core elders. With that, Xiao Mao hurriedly flipped through the medicinal pills that Xiaohua just gave him. He took out a medicinal pill and handed it to Xiaohua, saying, Here, big brother, this is it. Oh, this. Xiaohua glanced at it and said disapprovingly, This is the Luo Su pill. I refined it when I was practicing that day. It's a medicinal pill that nourishes the meridians and promotes true essence. There's also the dripping rain pill that was refined together with this blue sea pill. These two pills are about the same. I gave Xiao Mao and Hong Xiao these two pills. Senior martial brother is referring to one of these two pills. This is the Luo Su pill, and the Shilin pill? Li Zongbao looked at Xiaohua in disbelief. He stretched out his hand and took the medicinal pill from Xiaohua's hand. He looked at it carefully again. Sure enough, this was the medicinal pill that he took during the sword tomb battle. This thing was similar to the heaven-mending pill in his hand, but after looking at it carefully, it was still different. Indeed! Xiaohua nodded slightly. It's refined with common spiritual herbs like siming fruit. Because those spiritual herbs are cheap and not worth many spirit stones, I used it to practice. Have you seen the real Luo Su pill and Shilin pill? Li Zongbao's mood was a little agitated, and he looked straight at Xiaohua and asked. Xiaohua knew what Li Zongbao was talking about. He shook his head and said, I don't have any spirit stones. Naturally, I won't spend a lot of money to buy those Luo Su pills and Shilin pills. However, I know that the ones refined by others are not the same as the ones refined by me. Of course, I don't know why they are different. If senior brother asks too many questions, little brother doesn't know how to answer. Xiaohua immediately sealed Li Zongbao's mouth. Sigh. Li Zongbao threw the pill to Xiao Mao and sighed. Whether it is the Luo Su pill or the Shilin pill, I have seen them before and have consumed them. However, junior brother Zhao's void-slaying pill was truly different from theirs. That day, I thought it was some kind of miracle medicine, and even showed off in front of Master and the various core formation masters. But I didn't expect that it was actually such an ordinary medicinal pill. Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart tightened and he raised his head to look at Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao was also stunned for a moment before coming to his senses. He slightly shrugged his shoulders, put the medicinal pill into his mouth, and closed his eyes to cultivate. Xiaohua! You don't blame me! The situation on that day was that when the nest was overturned, no egg would remain intact. If even the core formation masters fall, then the foundation establishment and aura refining disciples will definitely not be able to survive. As soon as he saw Xiaohua raise his eyebrows, Li Zongbao understood Xiaohua's vigilance and immediately explained via voice transmission. Actually, junior brother, with your cultivation and battle achievements, you are the #1 person in the Sword Dao Great War. Even if you have some difficulties, in the entire Dawn Rain continent, who dares to touch you? Not to mention that I and the others won't agree, even your Thunder Control sect. Can all the sects that are participating in the Sword Dao Great War agree? You also don't have to hide anything. Xiaohua knew that this was Li Zongbao's good intentions, but he understood in his heart that how could he know about his own secrets and his enemies. Therefore, he also transmitted his voice. These are all my secrets. I know what I'm doing. But Li Zongbao shook his head again. There is no such thing as an airtight wall in this world. The current you can't hide anymore. I don't dare to say that there are people who know about it now, but I dare to say that in less than 5 years after the Dao Sword Great War, your actions, your heroic deeds, your fame, will definitely spread throughout the entire Dawn Rain continent. Sigh, Xiaohua sighed. It was indeed so. Although he disguised himself as nameless and temporarily hid from the Dao sect and the sword cultivators, this trip to Huan country had already completely exposed his strength. Even if he didn't follow Fairy Hong Xia to Huan country, from Shui Mingcha's tone, there were already people among the sword cultivators who knew that he was nameless. One must know that Nameless' reputation was now 100 times more resounding than the terrifying Phoenix. If the name of the terrifying Phoenix was known, then so be it. But if the identity of John Doe was known, his strength was comparable to that of a Yuanying realm cultivator. He already had a certain status on the Dawn Rain continent. How could the powerful person who sealed her not have heard of her name? Furthermore, he didn't even know that it was the 3 nascent soul cultivators from Xuyuan's school and Qiqiao's sect who killed Shang Huaming. How could they not know? Which one of these cultivators hadn't lived for thousands of years? Which one of them was scheming and astute? How could they not investigate his background and origin? When that time came, how could he still hide? Not to mention taking revenge for Xiao Yuehong and Gong Mingwei, even he would find it difficult to protect himself. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have participated in that Sword Dao Great War. Xiao Hua was somewhat regretful, but then he smiled bitterly. If he hadn't participated in the Sword Dao Great War, the cultivators of the Dao sect, would the number of people who died be limited to the current number? Not to mention the others, Cui Hongshan and the others would have died long ago. Junior brother, if you still have any hesitation, you might as well. Li Zongbao pondered for a moment, and still transmitted his voice. I have the special pardon order of the sect leader of the Utopia sect. I can plead with Reverend He Ping of the Utopia sect for you. Haha, thank you, senior brother. Xiao Hua patted his chest and said, Don't I also have the special pardon order of the Imperial Thunder sect? If you need anything, I can ask the sect leader of the Imperial Thunder sect for help. All right. Li Zongbao knew that Xiao Hua wasn't willing to explain clearly to him, and he couldn't force him. He nodded slightly, looked up at the millions of Ming Mountains, and said in a low voice, Actually, sometimes I still miss the past. Unfortunately, this expression only stayed on his face for a moment, and then slowly disappeared. You'd better take the heavenly pill quickly, Jiu Xia said coldly from afar. If you delay any longer, you'll miss the past even more in the future. Li Zongbao glanced at Jiu Xia indifferently, sat down cross-legged, looked at the heavenly pill, opened it, and swallowed it, and began to regulate his breathing. Xiao Hua, come here for a moment, Jiu Xia said. All right, Xiao Hua agreed, and released his divine sense. He looked around, and then walked towards Jiu Xia. However, when he passed by Xiao Mao, he didn't forget to say, Xiao Mao, when you're done regulating your breathing, put away the 6 illusory swords just now. Then, without waiting for Xiao Mao's agreement, he walked quickly to Jiu Xia's side, squatted down, looked at Hongxia Fairy, and asked in a low voice, What plan do you have? Well, I've roughly looked at it, and I've also made some calculations, Jiu Xia said bluntly, as if she was an old acquaintance of Xiao Hua. Sister's primordial qi has been greatly damaged, and her bloodline has been destroyed, which is indeed very serious. Originally, I thought that if I could repair her bloodline, her primordial qi would be slowly nourished, and her dharma body would also be able to recover. However, this method should be inferior, and it's not good for her Dao foundation, and it would be difficult for her dharma body to achieve great success in the future. Xiao Hua knew that Jiu Xia's thoughts were meticulous, and this was just a prelude, so he didn't reply, and quietly listened to her explanation. Compared to this inferior method, I have 2 other plans, the middle plan and the superior plan, Jiu Xia said again. However, this all depends on your alchemy skills. Let's see what kind of pills you can refine. Oh? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows, and asked curiously, What do you mean? To tell you the truth, I have a pill formula and a secret technique here. This secret technique is used in conjunction with the pill. This pill is extremely difficult to refine, and it's already not bad for an ordinary alchemist to refine a first-grade pill. Of course, the spiritual herbs and other things in this pill formula can also be reduced, and the pill after the reduction is easy to refine. However, the difference in their effects was like heaven and earth. Moreover, it can't be used in conjunction with the secret technique. Previously, I thought that if you can refine the pill after the reduction, it can be regarded as a middle plan. It should be more beneficial for Sister's cultivation. However, looking at the appearance of your fellow apprentices, the pills you refine are actually not bad, so Sister has another superior plan, Jioxia said with a smile. If you can refine a first-grade pill, Sister's Dharma body will be able to be reconstructed, and it will be able to achieve great success in the future. After Jioxia finished speaking, Xiaohua frowned and asked, "How many grades of pills are there?" "Pills are divided into 9 grades, and each grade has different effects." "Then, do you have the spiritual herbs and other things to refine the pill?" This pill, to be honest, I have always wanted to refine it." Jioxia didn't hide it from Xiaohua and said, "I have collected these spiritual herbs for many years, and most of them are complete, but a small part has never been found." Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart turned cold, and he said with a bitter smile, "You don't even have the spiritual herbs, how can I refine a first-grade pill?" "You fool!" Jioxia said with a smile. "I am talking about the spiritual herbs to refine a 9th-grade pill. How can that be refined by you? You only need to refine a first-grade pill, and Sister will be saved." Xiaohua's heart shook, and he hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to look at Jioxia's smiling face. Although this girl only has a budding face, under her smiling face, there is a hidden beauty hidden in her eyes, and even a little bit of it is unbearable for ordinary people. Jioxia looked at Xiaohua's embarrassed state, and then looked at Fairy Hongxia who was lying in her arms, and said with a smile, "Unfortunately, the situation is urgent, and I don't have any spiritual pills on me, so I can only make this plan in a hurry. Otherwise, based on Sister's ability to control the innate primordial water, I can find a better secret technique." "Spiritual pills to cultivate the innate primordial water?" Xiaohua asked curiously. "What I am going to refine, isn't this the spiritual pill?" -11. Chapter 2795. Haha, more or less. Jioxia was very patient with Xiaohua. "However, that spirit pill is a bit overbearing. It would be better if you could use a milder pill to nourish your body and replenish your blood and qi." "Replenish your blood and qi?" Xiaohua's eyes turned slightly as he probed. "Then is the parasol pill completed?" "Parasol pill? What kind of spirit pill is that?" Jioxia was stunned. Xiaohua blinked and smiled. "It's the blood and qi replenishing medicine commonly used by the Taoist sect." "Oh." Jioxia nodded. "That kind of low-level spirit pill naturally won't work." "All right." Xiaohua nodded. If Jioxia wasn't beside him, he would definitely take out the parasol pill for Fairy Hongxia to consume. However, since he didn't know how to repair his Dharma body and Jioxia knew, he naturally couldn't blindly command her. "Did you also refine it?" At this moment, Jioxia smiled and said, "Take it out and let me see. It's also good to know your alchemy skills." "Yes." Xiaohua touched his hand and took out the earliest parasol pill he refined. This pill was refined under Xiao Hongyue's supervision. If it wasn't a critical moment, he definitely wouldn't be willing to take it out. "Huh!" Looking at the parasol pill in Xiaohua's hand, shock appeared on Jioxia's face. She whispered, "The medicinal fragrance is restrained, and the pill veins are faintly discernible. You can actually refine a first-grade spirit pill? Is this a first-grade spirit pill?" Xiaohua was a little puzzled. He had never heard of a 9th-grade spirit pill before. Jioxia obviously didn't pay attention to the conversation between Xiaohua and Li Zongbao, so she naturally didn't look at the sky-mending pill in Li Zongbao's hand. At this moment she stretched out her hand and said, "Let me see this parasol pill." Xiaohua handed the parasol pill to Jioxia. She held it in her hand and looked at it over and over again. Then, a 5-colored light flashed in her eyes. This light disappeared in a flash, and then Jiuxia's face was really filled with shock. "Let me see the spirit pill you gave your senior brother just now." Jiuxia stretched out her hand and said again. "Oh? What's wrong?" Xiaohua didn't understand, but he still took out a spirit pill. Similarly, Jiuxia's eyes shone with an illusory light. However, after that, Jiuxia's face was filled with confusion. That small face frowned slightly, causing Xiaohua's heart to ache slightly. Only after a long time did Jiuxia ask again. "Do you still have this parasol pill? Can you give me one?" "Yes." Xiaohua took one without hesitation. What a joke! Not to mention one, even if it was 10, Xiaohua would still give it to him. "Many thanks." Jiuxia looked at the parasol spring pill. It was exactly the same as the previous one. She then carefully kept it in her bosom and sent the parasol spring pill into Fairy Hongxia's mouth. She smiled and said, "Your parasol spring pill is even better than I expected. With this pill, things will be much easier in the future. Let sister rest for a few more days and let me think about it." "All right." Xiaohua nodded, his heart at ease. He then looked at the other medicinal pill in Jiuxia's hand and asked curiously, "Just now, did you see anything different about this medicinal pill? Don't you know the medicinal pills that you refined yourself?" Jiuxia said with a chuckle. "Indeed, I don't know." "Please explain." Xiaohua answered honestly. "This medicinal pill is a top-notch item." Jiuxia held the medicinal pill in her hand and said with a smile, "Treat it as a first-grade spirit pill. It perfectly combines the spirit herbs and other ingredients used to refine spirit pills. Its effect is 30% greater than that of ordinary medicinal pills. And perhaps yours is even more. However, the parasol spring pill that I gave sister just now, although it was also a first-grade spirit pill, there was actually a strand of star power condensed inside for some reason. This star power is an extraterrestrial object, different from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in Xiaoyu continent. This star power can not only increase the medicinal effect of spirit pills, it can also cause them to mutate." "Mutate?" Xiaohua suddenly realized. He immediately thought of the parasol spring pill that the Zhu mother and daughter had taken in Jinghua City. It can break the cursed talisman? Kill the taboo? And that's the general idea. Jiuxia's eyes glowed with a strange light. "However, there are really too many mutations. I only know a little." "But..." Xiaohua was puzzled again. "These 2 types of medicinal pills were refined by me personally. It seems that there isn't any special difference." "Gugu." Jiuxia covered her mouth and laughed. "I didn't ask you what the difference was when you refined them. I really don't know. Even if you asked me, I wouldn't be able to answer." Xiaohua scratched his head. "Then you'd better think carefully," Jiuxia said. "If you can refine another spirit pill that is similar to the parasol spring pill, the benefits to sister. I won't say more. You know it clearly in your heart." "And I know." Xiaohua nodded. This matter involved Fairy Hongxia, so he naturally had to think carefully. In the following days they spent their time on the airship, unable to find a suitable place to stay. Fortunately, there were no swordsmen here, nor were there any battles between soul cultivators and swordsmen. Xiao Mao's injuries were the lightest, and he would be able to move freely after 3 days. He collected the storage pouches of the 6 swordsmen, and dealt with the corpses as usual. Then, he found a suitable place 100 miles away. After another 3 days, Li Zongbao was finally able to move. Only then did he activate the flowing cloud-flying ship and fly to this place. As for Fairy Hongxia, who was the most seriously injured, she still hadn't woken up. However, Xiaohua believed in his parasol spring pill. Moreover, through taking her pulse, he knew that Fairy Hongxia was steadily recovering. Xiao Mao was looking for a valley at the bottom of 2 mountains. This was rarely seen in Huan country. Xiaohua and Xiao Mao steered the flying boat to land at the foot of the mountain. Xiaohua very naturally clapped his hands and took out the capital star array spirit talisman again. Jiu Xia was dumbfounded when he saw Xiao Hua casting out the talismans with great familiarity and the capital star formation slowly taking shape. He exclaimed in disbelief. Xiao Hua, this is the capital star formation? Oh? You really know everything! Xiao Hua was a little embarrassed. It was as if everything was no longer a secret in Jiu Xia's eyes. He had used talismans countless times to arrange them, but no one had ever discovered them. Before this star array was even arranged, it was seen through by Jiu Xia. It's the capital star array, Xiao Hua replied. You really have a lot of knowledge. You even know this. This array, where did you get it? Jiu Xia asked anxiously. I made it myself. Xiao Hua also planned to keep it a secret from Jiu Xia, so he blinked. You also know how to make talismans and array talismans? Jiu Xia was stunned. This answer was clearly out of her expectations. Yes, except for giving birth. After Xiao Hua said it, he felt that it was inappropriate. He lowered his voice and said, I know everything else. Jiu Xia didn't care at all. She said anxiously, Then, can you help me make a set? After saying that, Jiu Xia was a little regretful. She said anxiously, Forget it, pretend I didn't say anything. This item is so precious. Oh? You want to ask me for help? Xiao Hua asked. Alas, I don't even know what I want to ask you for help. Jiu Xia sighed. From this, maybe it's this array? Or maybe it's not. It's okay, this array is yours. Xiao Hua waved his hand. You saved Hongxia, this is my thanks. Xiao Hua, you are so nice. Jiu Xia happily jumped on the foothill. Her braids swayed behind her head, looking very cute. This moment of happiness really came from the bottom of her heart. It seemed that she hadn't felt like this for a long time. Her smile was as brilliant as a mountain flower, and as graceful as the bright moonlight. The slyness and intelligence on her face had long been covered by this joy. This is how a little sister should be. Xiao Hua was also happy to see this. Xiao Mao was unhappy. He twisted his fingers and said, Big brother, you don't have to be so obvious. You have so many good things, why didn't you take them out earlier? Why didn't I take them out earlier? Xiao Hua rolled his eyes at him and said, You have eyes but can't see. Fine, I won't argue with you. Xiao Mao said with a smile. You gave them to this one, you might as well give one to me. Cough, cough. Li Zongbao, who was originally cultivating with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. Although he was only coughing, his eyes were very obvious. From the looks of it, Li Zongbao had already learned a lesson from his experience with medicinal pills. As long as there was something good, then, it was better to open his mouth first. This is a spiritual talisman, Xiao Hua said with a little exasperation. Without spiritual beast fur and blood, where do you want me to refine it for you? Spiritual talisman, Xiao Mao said with surprise. So Big Brother also knows how to refine spiritual talismans. This is the first time I've heard of it. Not bad. Li Zongbao's meridians were damaged, and his mental cultivation method seemed to have some flaws. Seeing that the two of them were only praising him and not refining the materials, Xiao Hua could only bitterly smile. I have some spiritual beast fur here. I don't know what you need. Jiu Xia was very obedient. She stretched out her hand and took out a storage bag. You don't need it, Xiao Hua said with a smile. You should quickly take a look at what Hongxia needs. And I have already prepared this. Jiu Xia was not polite. She took out a jade slip and handed it to Xiao Hua, saying, According to what I discussed with you before, this is the pill formula of the Flying Shadow pill. Moreover, I also listed the spiritual herbs, spiritual blood and other things needed to refine the Flying Shadow pill from the 1st grade to the 6th grade. As long as I have it, I will mark it. You do as you see fit. Presumably, you are an alchemist, so you should have some things in your storage bag. Hearing this, Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He didn't expect Jiu Xia to be so well prepared and so considerate. She was really meticulous. After taking the jade slip and probing it with his divine sense, Xiaohua was even more surprised. Inside was the pill formula of the flying shadow pill, but Xiaohua had never seen such a detailed pill formula in his life. -11. Chapter 2796. This pill formula was divided into 6 grades. The main ingredients of each grade were similar, but the age of the main ingredients and the amount of each main ingredient were different. However, when it came to the supplementary ingredients, the differences were huge. The most important thing was that Jiu Xia had written down the reasons for these differences very clearly. Rather than saying that this was a flying shadow pill formula, it was better to say that this was a simple pill formula analysis technique. Many thanks. Xiaohua raised his head and said in a low voice. He. Jiu Xia pursed her lips and said, Don't thank me, this is all ready-made. I just showed it to you. Moreover, this pill formula doesn't have a refining method, so it's useless for others to have it. Of course, you can use this pill formula, but you can't leak it out. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. And I know what I'm doing. Xiaohua naturally knew the importance of this pill formula. It was probably a secret technique of Jiu Xia's sect. It was already good that he could refine this flying shadow pill, so how could he dare to leak it out? I believe you. Jiu Xia nodded and took out a storage bag. This is the material I collected in my early years. Take it. Don't. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, I'd better take a look first. There are many things in this pill formula that I've never seen before. I still need to ask you for advice. All right. Jiu Xia tilted her head and thought for a moment, then said, What you know is what you know, what you don't know is what you don't know. Xiaohua, with your cultivation method, you'll definitely go very far. After that, Xiaohua activated the capital star array and casually wrote down the method of setting up the capital star array on 3 jade slips. He threw 2 of them to Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao to shut their mouths, and handed the last one to Jiu Xia. Thus, the 4 of them each stayed in one place, and started to comprehend the jade slips. The flying shadow pill's pill formula was extremely detailed, but it was also strange because there was spirit blood inside the pill formula. Jiu Xia had already said that it contained spiritual blood before he got the pill formula. However, Xiaohua didn't care. He even thought that he had misheard. When he had first obtained the jade slip, he had used his divine will to look at the spirit plants, as well as their names and shapes. Some of the spirit plants had different names, but based on their shapes, he could tell that they existed in the space. As for the spirit blood, he had ignored it. When he started looking at the first grade flying shadow pill, he realized that there was a type of spirit blood in each grade after the main ingredient, and each spirit blood had a different name. Damn it! Xiaohua suddenly realized something. This flying shadow pill. I'm afraid it uses spiritual blood as a catalyst to stimulate the cultivator's bloodline and create a dharma body. This is the secret technique that the cultivation aristocratic families really want. Jiu Xia. Xiaohua opened his eyes and asked in a low voice. The spirit blood inside this flying shadow pill can only be used after it has been refined? Of course. Jiu Xia nodded matter-of-factly. How can spirit blood be used if it isn't refined? You're an alchemist yourself, there's no reason you don't know, right? But then, Jiu Xia suddenly froze and said with some realization. Could it be, you don't know how to refine spirit blood? Xiaohua bitterly smiled. He knew how to refine spirit blood, but he didn't know that there was also refining spirit blood in alchemy. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua said, I know how to refine spirit blood, but I don't know if it's the same as what you're talking about. Jiu Xia shook his head. I only know how to refine spirit blood, I don't know the specifics. All right. Xiaohua was helpless and could only try his best. Since it was refining spirit blood, the demon realm's blood refining technique should be useful. Half a day later, Xiaohua and Jiuxia didn't stay idle and finally thoroughly understood the Flying Shadow Pill's pill formula. Normally, Xiaohua's alchemy skills were already very good, and he knew all the spirit plants like the back of his hand. However, the spirit plants in this pill formula were different from the ones he knew, so he had to ask them one by one. There were even some spirit plants that Xiaohua didn't have and Jiuxia didn't collect. According to the pill formula, Xiaohua found similar spirit plants in his space and discussed the effects of these spirit plants with Jiuxia. Jiuxia didn't know much about spirit blood, but he had some knowledge about spirit plants. After discussing with Xiaohua, they complemented each other. After half a day, not only did Xiaohua have a thorough understanding of the pill formula, he also had a new understanding of the planting and refining of some spirit plants. "You're really old and learn," Xiaohua sighed, as if Jiuxia's words had opened a new door to alchemy for him. "The cultivation foundation of this dawn rain continent is really unfathomable." Another half a day later, Xiaohua brought back the spirit herbs and spirit blood that Jiuxia had collected. He compared them with the pill recipe and the spirit herbs in his space. He sorted out the materials needed to refine the Flying Shadow Pill and returned the bag of holding to Jiuxia. Jiuxia looked at the spiritual herbs that had barely been touched and the spiritual blood that had been taken away. Her heart was filled with astonishment. However, her face remained calm and she did not say anything. It was as if everything was within her calculations. After putting away the storage pouch, Jiuxia asked, "Are you ready? Are you going to refine pills on the flying boat? Have you found the reason for the difference in the pills?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly. In these past few days, when he was looking at the pill formula, he was also thinking about the difference between the earliest parasol pill and the later pills. He was even thinking about the difference between the rejuvenation pill and the ageless pill. The rejuvenation pill and the ageless pill could be understood. After all, one was refined with the power of heavenly thunder and the other was refined with ordinary methods. The power of heavenly thunder was the reason why the rejuvenation pill could bring back the spring. However, Xiaohua couldn't understand the reason why the parasol pill was unique. It seemed there wasn't any difference. It wasn't until the end that Xiaohua recalled the details of his alchemy that he finally had an idea. When he was refining the parasol pill, he was guarding the side of the pill furnace. But when he was refining other pills, he wasn't completely guarding the side of the pill furnace. He even left the cave to go to other places. Maybe it's because my character is good and I can refine pills by guarding beside the pill furnace? Xiaohua could only wipe his face like this. Now that Jiuxia asked, he naturally couldn't say the reason. He only looked around and said, "Naturally, I can't refine pills on the flying boat. It's too noisy and will delay your cultivation. I'd better find a cave. As for the difference, I have some ideas. I can only give it a try. You take a drop of spirit blood for every pill. Are you planning to refine one pill for every pill?" Jiuxia asked tentatively. "Can you only refine one pill at a time?" Xiaohua asked back. "Oh? You can refine 2 pills?" Jiuxia was slightly puzzled. "Oh, I understand. Your pill formula has the weight of 1 flying shadow pill." Xiaohua suddenly understood. "That's right." Jiuxia nodded. "If you can refine 2 flying shadow pills at a time, the sun will rise from the west." "Ha ha ha, if you use 2 drops of spirit blood, you can naturally do it." Xiaohua laughed. "I can only use 1 drop of spirit blood." Jiuxia nodded seriously. "Can you refine 2 drops of spirit blood at a time?" This? Xiaohua was astonished. He had refined 9 drops of spirit blood at a time, but he didn't know if his refining method was the same as what Jiuxia said. "Try refining the first-grade flying shadow pill first." Jiuxia laughed. "If you fail, it doesn't matter. Sister can also use the ungraded flying shadow pill." Xiaohua knew that the ungraded flying shadow pill was a pill that didn't require spirit blood. It could only help Fairy Hongxia recover and repair her Dharma body. It couldn't achieve the effect of breaking and rebuilding. For Hongxia, I will also refine the first-grade flying shadow pill. Xiao Hua looked at the still unconscious Fairy Hong Xia and said firmly. In fact, when Xiao Hua took the Wu Xian pill, he wanted to wake Fairy Hong Xia up. However, Jiu Xia insisted that he couldn't wake her up after using the pill. The longer she was unconscious, the better it was for the Dharma body's recovery. Xiao Hua didn't quite understand the meaning of this, but he still listened to Jiu Xia's arrangement. I believe you. Jiu Xia nodded with a smile, as if she had returned to being the girl who had everything under control. In the valley, there were still small caves. Xiao Hua found one a little further away. When he entered, he clapped his hands and took out several puppets. Looking at the puppets gradually enlarging the cave, Xiao Hua casually waved his hands and prepared to take out the three-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace. But at this moment, Xiao Hua suddenly froze. Cold sweat seeped out of his back. He looked at the puppets in front of him and shuddered. What's wrong with me? Xiao Hua couldn't help but ask himself. This Jiu Xia, with such a remarkable ability and a mysterious origin, I should be extremely wary of her. We've only been friends for 10 days, and I actually revealed so many of my secrets to her. Even eldest senior brother and master don't know these things. How can I trust her so much? How can I tell her everything I know without holding anything back? That's right, ever since he met Jiu Xia, Xiao Hua had been somewhat wary at the beginning. But gradually, this wariness disappeared. Not to mention Jiu Xia's beauty, even Jiu Xia's cuteness was deeply imprinted in Xiao Hua's heart. He only treated Jiu Xia as someone he trusted. Not to mention Xiao Hua's lightning escape technique, even dream execution, mountain splitting, spirit execution, origin light, and soaring dragon scissors were all revealed to Jiu Xia. There was also the art of alchemy, the art of talisman creation. Jiu Xia saw through it all. Even the talisman of the heavenly star array, Xiao Hua agreed without hesitation the moment Jiu Xia asked for it. This was even more inconceivable for the stingy Xiao Hua. Now, Xiao Hua actually wanted to refine the flying shadow pill in front of Jiu Xia and took out the puppets. Everything seemed to be out of Xiao Hua's control, as if Jiu Xia had unknowingly taken control of it. What if Jiu Xia wanted to observe Xiao Hua's alchemy later? Would Xiao Hua agree or disagree? -11. Chapter 2797. What scared Xiao Hua the most was that Jiu Xia had let nature take its course. Everything was untraceable, and Xiao Hua could not help but do it. It was true that Xiao Hua had intended to reveal some of his cultivation, but he had never thought of revealing everything about himself. How could Xiao Hua explain the several tens of thousands of years of medicinal age of the spiritual herbs used in alchemy? However, when Xiao Hua left Jiu Xia's side, he came to a realization. However, when Xiao Hua thought about it, it seemed that everything did not allow him to have any doubts. When Xiao Hua first met Jiu Xia only asked for his help. She did not mention any rewards or conditions. Then, Jiu Xia said that he had to come to Sword Peak. Otherwise, Fairy Hong Xia would lose her life. Although he was a little doubtful, he still came. When he met Fairy Hong Xia and the rest in danger, although he did not show it, he already trusted Jiu Xia in his heart. After that, Jiu Xia's words saved Fairy Hong Xia's life and death. However, Jiu Xia didn't even say a word of thanks. He even told Xiao Hua very clearly that this had nothing to do with asking for his help. This was truly a righteous man. It made Xiao Hua trust Jiu Xia again. After that, Jiu Xia took out the flying shadow pill formula that she had collected and came up with the best, middle, and worst plans to save Fairy Hong Xia. This made Xiao Hua shed tears of gratitude, and he had already let his guard down. However, when he thought about it again, while saving Fairy Hong Xia, Jiu Xia was also making use of Xiao Hua to refine pills. In this world, there has never been a lack of smart people. But to be so smart, to let someone be sold and help her count the spiritual stones, and even bargain for her, how many are there? Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This does not seem to be smart. If it is the power of charm, or the art of seduction, that is the real deal. Thinking of this, Xiaohua secretly released his Buddhist awareness. Sure enough, Jiu Xia sat beside Fairy Hong Xia, guarding her. It was fine to say that she cared about Fairy Hong Xia, or that she wanted to kidnap Fairy Hong Xia, but she did not notice that Xiaohua was opening up a cave. She always did the most appropriate thing at the most appropriate time, and would not let others have too much suspicion. A cultivator who can kill 5 third-grade illusory sword cultivators with one sentence actually called a late-stage foundation establishment female cultivator sister. Isn't this a bit too much? Xiaohua thought of how Jiu Xia called Fairy Hong Xia sister. Previously it was extremely intimate, but now he felt that it was too strange. But I am just Xiaohua. Even if I am nameless, what is worthy of Jiu Xia's desire? Xiaohua really couldn't figure it out. With some inexplicable apprehension and caution, Xiaohua activated the puppets a little more. Soon, he hastily opened up a cave. Taking advantage of the fact that Jiu Xia wasn't paying attention, he hurriedly put away the puppets. However, just as Xiaohua took out the pill furnace and was about to preheat it, Jiu Xia came. Xiaohua, can I see how you refine pills? Jiu Xia's smile was very beautiful, like a little sister talking to her brother calmly. This? Xiaohua hesitated, not daring to look at Jiu Xia's face. He lowered his head and said, This Xiao has already thought about it. One of the differences between refining pills is that when Xiao Mao first refined the parasol pill, this Xiao refined it alone, and there was no one watching. Oh? So that's the case, then I can only not watch. Jiu Xia did not have the slightest bit of awkwardness or displeasure. Her voice was still very pleasant to hear. I still want to see how this first-grade pill is refined. Wait until this Xiao refines it, then you can see, Xiaohua said with a smile. Okay, you refine it yourself. Jiu Xia skipped out again. When she reached the entrance of the cave, she laughed and said, Leave big sister to me. I will also tidy up that secret technique and give it to you in a while. That secret technique also targets 6th-grade pills, so it is a bit different. You and sister are the closest, so you have to help her. AI. This Jiu Xia. Should I trust her? Or should I not? Xiaohua only dared to raise his head at this time, looking at Jiu Xia's graceful back, and thought with some worry. At this time, although Xiaohua was a little confused and even worried about Fairy Hong Xia, his alchemy skills had reached the point of perfection, so refining the flying shadow pill was not difficult at all. He threw in the spiritual herbs one by one, and when the spiritual herbs turned into juice in the furnace, he waved a spell to quench the impurities inside. As the green smoke was produced in the furnace, wisps of medicinal fragrance rushed to his face, and Xiaohua's heart gradually calmed down again. After all, Jiu Xia looked like a budding girl, but her magical powers were unfathomable. Xiaohua was definitely not her opponent. Why would someone like her, who could easily kill him, want to scheme against him? Instead of being on tenterhooks, it was better to face her calmly. Perhaps everything was just Xiaohua's own guess. Of course, even if she coveted the flying shadow pill, he would help her refine it and get the pill formula. Why not? In addition to being extra careful, Xiaohua was really at his wits' end. Spells were cast one after another, and the Samadhi true fire was like a dragon surging outside the 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace. This kind of fire control method was simply beyond the reach of ordinary alchemists. Even seeing that the pill furnace was fine for the time being, Xiaohua even diverted a bit of attention to refine the jade talisman. In fact, as early as when Xiaohua was refining the fire talisman, he wanted to refine the talisman of the capital star array into a jade talisman. Unfortunately, this guy never had time to do what he wanted to do, so he had been delaying it. Until now, when refining the flying shadow pill, he had leisure. After all of the medicinal liquids had been refined, Xiaohua began to fuse the pills according to his previous understanding of the flying shadow pill's pill formula. Generally speaking, fusing pills was the key to refining pills. The amount, order, and timing of each medicinal liquid were all related to whether or not the pill could be formed. The true pill formula contained the essence of the pill refining method. Without these specific methods, the possibility of refining a pill was next to none. Fortunately, Xiaohua's alchemy skills had always been self-taught. After the spiritual herbs of the flying shadow pill were replaced by him, he was even more confident. After a few days, he managed to fuse dozens of medicinal liquids into a fist-sized pill liquid. At this time, Xiaohua understood that the part he was familiar with had been completed. The next step was to refine the spiritual blood. Xiaohua secretly released a strand of Buddhist consciousness and looked at Jiuxia. Jiuxia was still sitting next to Red Dawn Fairy, and there was no change. On the contrary, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked at the cave impatiently, as if they were worried about him not coming out. Especially Xiao Mao, who was sniffing from time to time, as if he was inhaling the medicinal fragrance. Red Dawn, why hasn't she woken up yet? After so long, Xiaohua was puzzled again. Even if she was seriously injured, she should have woken up by now after taking the parasol pill. Could it be that this was done by Jiuxia? If I don't refine the flying shadow pill, Red Dawn won't be able to wake up? Withdrawing his Buddhist consciousness, Xiaohua helplessly released the spiritual fire to refine the drop of spiritual blood known as the Swift Sparrow. Xiaohua had already helped Li Zongbao refine his essence blood, so controlling the refining of this spiritual blood was not a difficult task. However, what shocked Xiaohua the most was that as the spirit fire tempered the spirit blood, a 3-foot-tall shadow gradually appeared within the rain-like spirit blood. The formation of this shadow was 10 times more difficult than the formation of the shadow within Li Zongbao's spirit blood. Xiaohua actually refined it for a total of 9 days, and after taking dozens of spiritual power replenishing pills, he finally refined the complete shadow. Lucky! Xiaohua secretly wiped away his cold sweat. Just the spiritual blood of a first-grade spirit pill is so difficult to refine. No wonder this flying shadow pill. Even Jiuxia couldn't refine it. Moreover, it's a good thing that I have already refined my essence blood, otherwise I definitely wouldn't have been able to complete it in 9 days. Furthermore, with my current pill refining skills, I can barely extend the time needed to refine the pill. I'm afraid that this pill will condense before I finish refining the spiritual blood, right? Go, Xiaohua urged the spiritual blood, and the shadow of the swift sparrow was about to enter the pill furnace. Quick, an indescribable cry came out from the shadow. The blood shadow of the swift sparrow that had been completely refined seemed to have gained some intelligence. It knew that the alchemy furnace was its only way out, so it started to struggle and wanted to escape from Xiaohua's control. The sound of the swift sparrow was extremely loud, and Jiuxia, Li Zongbao, and Xiao Mao all heard it. Xiao Mao couldn't help but rush to the entrance of the cave, as if he wanted to help. As for Jiuxia, he didn't even frown, and his body naturally didn't move. He only slightly opened his eyes, and then closed them again. Li Zongbao turned around, looked at Jiuxia and Fairy Hongxia, and walked over to Xiao Mao's side, and whispered to him. The two of them knew that Xiaohua was refining pills inside the cave. Although they were worried, they didn't rush in. Seeing that the blood shadow of the swift sparrow was so unruly, Xiaohua wasn't alarmed, and was instead happy. This level of spiritual blood was the real spiritual blood. To deal with this kind of blood shadow, Xiaohua already had a method. Hundreds of soul strands were released from his law eyes, and tightly bound the blood shadow. Swift! The swift sparrow's shadow struggled a few times, but how could it be a match for Xiaohua's soul strands? Go, Xiaohua sneered, and urged the soul strands to pull the 3 qilong shadow, and threw it into the pill furnace. Immediately after, several pill refining techniques were sent in, and a formless imprisonment was born from the pill furnace, enveloping the swift sparrow's blood shadow, and forcefully dragging it into the pill liquid. Good, seeing that the pill refining techniques were also effective against the blood shadow, Xiaohua was overjoyed. Immediately after, He sent the pill refining techniques into the pill furnace, and the magic power formed ripples that converged into the pill liquid, firmly imprisoning the swift sparrow's blood shadow inside. -11. Chapter 2798. Not only that, the blood shadow of the swift sparrow struggled a few times in the pill elixir and gradually merged with the pill elixir. So that's how it is. Xiaohua's divine sense never left the pill furnace, and even stayed near the pill elixir. He could clearly see that among the dozens of spirit herbs of the flying shadow pill, other than the sovereign, minister, and 5 elements, there was also the ability to melt and confine the spirit blood shadow. The different pill elixirs formed thin threads that tightly wrapped around the blood shadow and slowly seeped in. The art of alchemy is also limitless. Xiaohua sighed inwardly. Big brother. Xiao Mao's voice came several times. No matter. Xiaohua finally had the time to say. I'm very normal here. In a few days, I'll be able to form the pill. Good. Xiao Mao and the others heard and then nodded. On the contrary, Jiu Xia's indifferent face revealed some astonishment. The fusion of the flying shadow pill didn't need to be said. Because of the addition of the spirit blood, the time needed was also extended. In the end, it took a total of 49 days for the pill to be formed. When Xiaohua finally sent the pill-forming technique into the phoenix-patterned 3-legged vermilion bird furnace, a clear sound rang out. The top of the phoenix-patterned cauldron opened by itself. A fist-sized bird flew out of the cauldron and flew out of the cauldron. Good! As expected of the flying shadow pill. Xiaohua's divine sense clearly saw that the swift sparrow was a shadow. A successful flying shadow pill could actually have a shadow. This was the first time Xiaohua had seen it, so he definitely didn't expect it before. Xiaohua waved his sleeve and covered it with the heaven and earth sleeve. Without any suspense, the swift sparrow fell into Xiaohua's hand. A pill the size of a thumb was spinning in the air. This pill was different from the ones Xiaohua had refined before. On the outside of the pill, there were fine pill veins that were faintly discernible. These pill veins formed the figure of a swift sparrow, as if it would fly out at any moment. The pill was blood red, and there was a faint layer of blood red mist inside, protecting the pill. Even Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't penetrate it. The pill image of this first-grade flying shadow pill was actually so beautiful, completely different from the ugly pill that Xiaohua had refined earlier. Congratulations, Xiaohua! Jiu Xia stood at the entrance of the cave with a smile. He didn't step into the cave as he spoke loudly. I still have to thank fellow Taoists for the pill formula. Xiaohua glanced at the pill furnace that was still surrounded by the true Samadhi fire and walked to the entrance of the cave. He placed the flying shadow pill in front of Jiu Xia and said, I wonder if fellow Taoist is interested in this pill? Jiu Xia did not stand on ceremony. He took the flying shadow pill and examined it. Then, he smiled and said, Your alchemy skills are indeed extraordinary. It far exceeds my expectations. This pill should be a first-grade high-grade pill. Then, 5 colors once again appeared in Jiu Xia's eyes. After the brilliance passed, Jiu Xia slightly frowned and said curiously, Xiaohua, although this flying shadow pill is very high quality, but it conforms to the norm. It is far from the star energy in the Wu Tsang pill from before. Ah? Is that so? Xiaohua stared blankly. He couldn't help but scratch his head as his brows wrinkled. This is already not bad. Jiu Xia hurriedly smiled and said, This pill can already be consumed. Do you want to continue refining the second-grade flying shadow pill? Or do you want me to wake sister up and consume it? As expected. Xiaohua thought to himself. Red Cloud's body, it was indeed Jiu Xia's doing. But she just admitted it. This makes me unable to. Do you think it's better to wake her up now? Or wake her up later? Xiaohua pushed the question to Jiu Xia. Naturally it's better to wake her up later. Jiu Xia smiled and said, In this way, not only will sister have a better harvest, I will also be able to obtain a first-grade flying shadow pill. Is she really fine? Xiaohua asked worriedly. Of course. Jiu Xia nodded. Right now, sister is in hibernation. Although she is unconscious, her body is repairing itself. This kind of repair is far more effective than when a person is awake. Moreover, the effect on the body is far-reaching. Or rather, it is more in line with the heavenly Tao. That's right. Xiaohua secretly nodded. This Jiu Xia is right. Big brother. Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao spoke again after Jiu Xia. It was very obvious that Jiu Xia grasped the timing extremely well. When she should appear, she would definitely appear first. When she shouldn't appear, she would definitely not appear. And it's fine. Little brother's spirit pill has already been formed. Xiaohua looked at the two people's concern and said to Li Zongbao, Red Cloud's injury has the most basic guarantee. Little brother will discuss with Miss Jiu Xia and see if we can take another step. Stop before going too far. Li Zongbao said indifferently and turned his head. After taking 2 steps, another indifferent sentence floated over. Going too far is as bad as not going far enough. If it was someone else, they would naturally think more and perhaps stop here. Unfortunately, Xiaohua had always pursued perfection. That day when he was condensing his core in the sword tomb, facing the baptism of the 3 gold lightning tribulation, he did not hesitate to take out his primordial spirit that could benefit from the light. Whatever flying sword, whatever small dipper, he gave it all out. To put it bluntly, he was a person who wanted to take advantage of the netherworld even after death. How could he stop? After resting for half a day, Xiaohua threw the second batch of spirit herbs into the 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace one by one. This time, Jiu Xia did not rush him at all. Even the first-grade flying shadow pill, Jiu Xia only appreciated it for a moment before returning it to Xiaohua. She clearly said that she would definitely not accept the flying shadow pill if she did not have any extra flying shadow pills. Seeing Jiu Xia so upright, Xiaohua almost doubted his own thoughts. Looking at the gradually forming liquid pill, Xiaohua then took out some jade essence and was about to continue refining jade talismans. However, just as the jade essence melted into liquid, Xiaohua suddenly froze. How could he know how to refine talismans when he was refining the Wutsun pill? Other than guarding the pill furnace and meditating, there was nothing else he could do. Furthermore, he had even dozed off in the pill room of Yellow Flower Ridge. Could it be related to meditating? Xiaohua thought for a moment, then stretched out his hand and put the liquid jade into his space. He looked around himself, and really closed his eyes to meditate. Outside the cave, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao were comprehending the capital star array. Even Jiu Xia wanted this array, so Li Zongbao and the others naturally knew that this array was good stuff. Even though Jiu Xia was sitting beside Fairy Hung Xia with her eyes closed, looking calm on the surface, her heart was filled with an avalanche of emotions. Although Xiaohua knew how to refine pills, he did not know the difficulty of refining the first-grade flying shadow pill, let alone Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. But Jiu Xia knew. She had collected so many materials for the flying shadow pill in her storage bag, so why was she still unable to refine the flying shadow pill? The fundamental reason was that she did not trust the alchemists she knew. In other words, as far as she knew, there were not many alchemists who could refine the flying shadow pill. But this Xiaohua, this cultivator from the Imperial Thunder sect whom she met for the first time, actually refined it so easily. Moreover, it was a first-grade spirit pill. In fact, when she told Xiaohua about the flying shadow pill, Jiu Xia's original intention was to take out the pill formula for the non-grade flying shadow pill. She did not plan to tell him about the remaining 6th-grade pills. But it was also at that moment, in a flash, she felt that Xiaohua was the person she was looking for, the person who could help her, who might be able to fulfill her wish. Or perhaps, she was also testing Xiaohua. If she could not fulfill her wish, how could Xiaohua help her complete such a difficult task? Although it seemed that Jiu Xia trusted Xiaohua very much and told him everything, she did not hold back the pill formula for the flying shadow pill and even took out the spirit blood she had painstakingly collected. But in her heart, she really did not have any confidence. She did not have any confidence at all. And it wasn't that she didn't want to see how Xiaohua refined pills, and it wasn't that she didn't want to peek at Xiaohua's progress in refining pills, but she knew that at this time, she could only wait. She could only obtain Xiaohua's trust without arousing his suspicion and complete her important task. That task, she felt that it was almost impossible for her to complete. Just as Josia's thoughts were running wild, an inexplicable palpitation suddenly appeared in her heart. At the same time, a familiar aura appeared. Star power! Josia almost did not need to open her eyes. That wild, tyrannical, and incomparably pure star power aura seeped into her body through this not far distance. Xiaohua can really draw the power of the outer realm's origin stars. Josia's heart was beating wildly. Who exactly is he? Even at this moment, Josia still didn't dare to pry into Xiaohua's actions in the cave. Xiaohua had given her too many surprises, and these surprises didn't seem like they should be counted as surprises. Perhaps, other than this extremely difficult matter in front of me, I should also be able to land on him. Josia slightly opened her eyes and looked at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao in the distance, who did not know what was going on at all, and thought to herself. At the same time, the five-colored brilliance in Josia's eyes appeared again. Outside the cave where Xiaohua was, a faintly discernible brilliance was like a pillar of light that pierced the sky. It was the endless star power that fell into Xiaohua's body. Josia only took a glance and hurriedly closed her eyes. Her eyes returned to their original state. It's a pity, although Xiaohua has such a remarkable ability, his cultivation is really too weak. The difficult task in front of me, he might not be able to complete it, let alone my matter. Josia sighed slightly. I still have to wait. Then, Josia restrained her thoughts, as if she did not see the starlight at all. She did not dare to spy on what kind of remarkable ability Xiaohua was using in the cave. But if Josia really did spy on him, she was afraid her jaw would drop to the ground. -11. Chapter 2799. This was because Xiaohua wasn't doing anything. He was even taking a nap with his eyes closed. The spirit blood of a second-grade flying shadow pill was a snow swallow, a spiritual bird that was 6 feet long. Although this spiritual bird was twice the size of a swift sparrow, its rebellious and struggling power was twice as strong. Xiaohua used his soul thread to drag the blood shadow of the snow swallow into the pill furnace. Seeing the blood shadow of the snow swallow fuse with the pill liquid, Xiaohua was a little confused. Josia, where did this spirit blood come from? Why is every drop of spirit blood so powerful? When little white dragon's soul was sent into the mysterious dark cloud, it didn't seem to be so strenuous. I've already cultivated to the clear spirit sky. If I were still in the surrounding Qi sky, I'm afraid I wouldn't even be able to refine a first-grade spirit pill. The time to condense the pill was similar to the first time. It also took a total of 47 days to complete. The second-grade flying shadow pill was smaller than the first-grade flying shadow pill, but the shadow of the snow swallow was twice as big. Of course, the pattern on the flying shadow pill was also a snow swallow, and its color was a little thicker than blood. Congratulations, Xiaohua! Just after Xiaohua took the pill, Jiuxia's smiling voice appeared outside the cave. Xiaohua proudly handed over the second-grade flying shadow pill and said with a smile, Take a look. Does this spirit pill have star power? Okay. Jiuxia took it, and her eyes flashed with 5 colors. She said happily, This time there is star power! Xiaohua, how did you do it? This is my private matter. Miss Jiuxia, please don't blame me. Xiaohua smiled but didn't answer. Then, he clapped his hands and said, This is a first-grade flying shadow pill. Please accept it. All right. Jiuxia stretched out his hand and received it. At the same time, he returned the flying shadow pill to Xiaohua. Let's go. Xiaohua took the second-grade flying shadow pill and waved his hand. Please wake Hongxia up and let her take this spirit pill. Oh? Jiuxia was slightly surprised. You're not going to refine the third-grade flying shadow pill? No, Xiaohua shook his head and said. This second-grade flying shadow pill is already troublesome to refine. I'm afraid that the third-grade flying shadow pill will fail. This Zhao's spirit grass is simple, but Mrs. Spirit Blood is very precious. Don't be scared, don't be scared. Jiuxia waved her hand and said. Although this third-grade cold goose spirit blood is precious, it can be refined into a flying shadow pill. It is perfectly compatible with Big Sister's Ice Phoenix bloodline. The effect was several times better than the Snow Swallow. Besides, I still want the second-grade spirit pill with star power that you just refined. You don't disappoint me and Big Sister. This? Xiaohua bitterly smiled and said. This Xiao really feels that it won't be easy to refine a third-grade spirit pill. There's a 70% chance that this cold goose spirit blood will be wasted. Hee, since you have 30% confidence, why not give it a try? Jiuxia smiled. I think you can do it. I have 99% confidence in you. Seeing that Xiaohua was hesitating, Jiuxia thought for a moment and said, How about this? I'll wake her up now and teach her the secret technique. If you're able to refine a third-grade spirit pill, give it to Big Sister on the day it's completed. Otherwise, let Big Sister take this second-grade spirit pill. It won't delay Big Sister's recovery. What do you think? Xiaohua was most afraid of persuasion. After thinking for a moment, he nodded and said, All right, since you're not afraid that I'll spoil the flying shadow pill, what do I have to be afraid of? Good. Thank you for your trouble. Jiuxia smiled and nodded. She looked deeply at Xiaohua and turned around to wake Fairy Hongxia without hesitation. Jiuxia walked to the side of Fairy Hongxia with her back facing Xiaohua. Her eyes once again shone with the five-colored brilliance. Her right hand tapped on her forehead and pointed at Fairy Hongxia. Quick! A ray of five-colored brilliance landed on Fairy Hongxia's forehead. Fairy Hongxia moved slightly and a moan could be heard. Hongxia! Xiaohua was too embarrassed to call Fairy Hongxia his wife in front of everyone. He called out in a low voice and walked over. Xiaohua! Fairy Hongxia straightened her body. Her entire body was aching, and she felt an indescribable discomfort. There was an indescribable feeling between her bones. However, just as she called out to Xiaohua, her gaze landed on Jiuxia's face. Big Sister. Jiuxia smiled and didn't bow. She said, My name is Jiuxia. I've long heard of the rinsing flower sex Fairy Hongxia's beautiful name. Today, I finally have the chance to meet you. You truly live up to your name. Little sister is impressed. Jiuxia. Before Fairy Hongxia fainted, she only saw Xiaohua walking over on lightning. At that time, she only had Xiaohua in her eyes. Even if Jiuxia did appear, she might not even be worthy of her attention. But now, when she woke up, she saw such a beautiful woman in front of her. She even called her big sister. How could she not be vigilant? Hee, Hongxia, this is a fellow cultivator I met when I was lost in the Huan country. When Xiaohua heard Fairy Hongxia's unfriendly tone, how could he not know what she was thinking? He hurriedly explained. Jiuxia has the ability to predict the future. I came to the Sword-Edged Mountain under her suggestion. Otherwise, I would still be on my way to Drifting Cloud Lake. Oh, Fairy Hongxia frowned. Jiuxia looked very young, but her youthful vigor couldn't be concealed. When Fairy Hongxia first saw Jiuxia, her heart skipped a beat. It was an indescribable feeling. This feeling made her reject Jiuxia, but at the same time, she was slightly attracted to her. When she heard Xiaohua say that Jiuxia had an inconceivable ability, how could she not think about it? Furthermore, those 6 illusory swordsmen were killed by Miss Jiuxia. Xiaohua continued. If not for her, I wouldn't have been able to kill those 6 grade 3 illusory swordsmen. Also, Xiaohua continued, Your Dharma body collapsed and your elemental energy was greatly damaged. Miss Jioxia took out her pill formula and secret technique to treat your injuries. I am preparing to refine the flying shadow pill. At this point, Xiaohua was stunned. It seemed that he didn't need to explain so much. Wouldn't the more he explained, the more suspicious Fairy Hongxia would be? Why would he feel guilty for no reason? Oh, so it's like this. Many thanks, fellow Taoist Jioxia. Fairy Hongxia's face was expressionless as she struggled to get up to thank Jioxia. Elder sister, look at you, your body hasn't recovered yet. There's no need to be so polite. Jioxia hurriedly supported Fairy Hongxia and said with a smile. Little sister originally wanted to ask Xiaohua for help. Naturally, I had to do something for him first. Furthermore, elder sister is a peerless talent and a natural beauty. You are the leader of all the girls. Even if little sister isn't a man, I wouldn't be willing to let anything happen to elder sister. Little sister is doing something for elder sister. How could those stinky men understand? Hee. Fairy Hongxia was a little embarrassed by Jioxia's words. She said in a low voice, Little sister's looks are 10 times better than elder sister's, and your temperament is 100 times better than elder sister's. Although you haven't grown up yet, you are already so dazzling. If you become an adult in the future, won't you be a charming beauty? Elder sister can't compare to you all. Hee, the person elder sister is talking about, could it be elder sister? Jioxia smiled as she glanced at Xiaohua and said, Only someone with elder sister's looks would have such a reputation. Huanhua Sex Fairy Hongxia is extremely famous in the cultivation 3 kingdoms. Little sister has never heard of anyone who can compare to elder sister. I'm afraid that only an intelligent woman like elder sister can match up to a cultivator like Xiaohua. I'm afraid that Xiaohua wouldn't even look at others. Elder sister, you don't know how anxious Xiaohua has been these few days. Jioxia's voice grew softer, but Fairy Hongxia's laughter grew louder. The two of them were even whispering to each other. How? You don't know this, but the Imperial Thunder Sect has a person who enjoys the benefits of being in a favorable position. Fairy Hongxia's words were also transmitted over. Xiaohua stood by the side in a daze, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What are you talking about? Obviously, just a moment ago they were still on guard. How come in the blink of an eye? It's like they have known each other for a long time. Furthermore, is this the time to whisper? Shouldn't we be discussing the matter of healing her injuries first? While Xiaohua was feeling helpless, his heart became alert again. This Jioxia, her methods are really impressive. Although Fairy Hongxia's injuries have not healed and her state of mind is somewhat lacking, but ordinary people would not be able to gain her trust so easily. This Jioxia's bewitching technique is really powerful. Not only was Xiaohua stunned, even Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao were watching from the side, speechless. They were the same as Xiaohua, although they were bewitched by Jioxia's beauty, they were still alert in their hearts. They had never spoken to someone so sincerely the moment they met. Who would have thought that after Fairy Hongxia woke up, she would be so intimate with Jioxia with just a few words, far surpassing their expectations. Darling Xiao. Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao, not knowing how to remind him or find the time to transmit a message. Fairy Hongxia turned her head and smiled. You should go and refine the pills. Little sister Jioxia has already told me just now, my future cultivation will depend on darling Zhao's hard work. Also, little sister Jioxia is about to teach me the secret technique of Dharmakaya cultivation, you don't have to worry. Once I fully understand the secret technique, your pills will also be refined. Isn't that the best of both worlds? Fairy Hongxia emphasized the best of both worlds very much, and even winked at Xiaohua. Yes. Xiaohua's face was a little red, thinking that Fairy Hongxia mentioned the best of both worlds to imply that he already knew Jioxia. After hesitating for a while, he wanted to transmit a message to explain something. But just as he was about to speak, he was suddenly stunned, and then suddenly understood. Of course, who is Fairy Hongxia? She is a person who is said to be on par with Li Zongbao, Even if she is seriously injured, how can she not be alert? But when Fairy Hongxia heard that Jiuxia helped Xiaohua when he killed the 6 illusory swords, she naturally had the thought of befriending her. Both sides are Dao sect cultivators, and they met in Huan country. No matter what her motive was, as long as they could support each other, she would be a strong ally. To Fairy Hongxia and the rest, to Jiuxia, it was a good thing. This is what Fairy Hongxia meant by the best of both worlds. How is this the best of both worlds in Xiaohua's little abacus? Female cultivators, not to mention who they are, which one of them is not, beautiful on the outside and intelligent on the inside. -11. Chapter 2800. I'll have to trouble Miss Jiuxia to take care of Hongxia. The trace of doubt on Xiaohua's face was also swept away. He laughed loudly and turned around to enter the cave. Li Zongbao was naturally stunned, but after a little calculation, he roughly understood. He frowned and found a place to sit down and meditate alone. On the other hand, Xiao Mao was looking at this and that. He was really puzzled. Fairy Hongxia and Jiuxia were whispering to each other. He wanted to ask Li Zongbao about it, but Li Zongbao ignored him. Thus, he could only helplessly sit cross-legged at the entrance of the cave, protecting Xiaohua. A few days later, a medicinal fragrance wafted from the entrance of the cave. This medicinal fragrance wafted for dozens of days. On this day, everyone closed their eyes to comprehend their own cultivation methods. Suddenly, a loud and clear cry of a wild goose sounded from within the cave. That sound was very arrogant, but at the same time, it was also very desolate. Jiuxia heard the sound and opened her eyes. She looked at the cave and frowned slightly. This cry of a wild goose was obviously different from the previous 2 times. Others may not have heard it, but she heard it clearly. Sister. Fairy Hongxia naturally opened her eyes and was very sensitive to Jiuxia's expression. She whispered, "Is Xiaohua all right? And I'm afraid there is something wrong." Jiuxia didn't hide anything and said in a low voice, "Just now, Xiaohua already said that when he was refining the 2nd-grade spirit pill, he was already somewhat unable to do it. However, in order to give Big Sister a higher grade 3rd-grade spirit pill, he still insisted on refining a 3rd spirit pill. I couldn't stop him even if I wanted to. Sister is really lucky to meet such a deeply affectionate Dao companion like Xiaohua. However, Sister doesn't have to worry. The worst-case scenario is that he will waste a spirit pill. Nothing will happen to Xiaohua. Sigh, that's just how he is." Fairy Hongxia's eyes were filled with tenderness. If he can give others 10 points, he will definitely not give 9 points. Not just me, it's the same for others. After a long time, Sister will know. Hee, how can I stay with Sister and Xiaohua for long? After Xiaohua helps Mimi once, Mimi will leave this place. When will Mimi be able to see Jiejie in the future? Mimi doesn't even know. Jiuxia giggled. However, after chatting with elder sister for so many days, younger sister is really envious of elder sister and Xiaohua's feelings. And I like being together with elder sister even more. Then, Jiuxia's eyes became blurry as if she was looking into the distance. She muttered, "If only my younger sister had such an elder sister. How great would that be?" Seeing Jiuxia's pitiful expression, Fairy Hongxia's heart could not help but ache. She even blurted out, "If you don't mind, it would be good for us to become sworn sisters." "Ah? Really?" Jiuxia's face immediately revealed a look of surprise. That kind of surprise was like the birth of a bright moon in the night sky, making Fairy Hongxia's heart clear up again. "Of course," Fairy Hongxia said proudly. "If those stinky men can become sworn brothers, why can't we women do the same?" "Good." Jiuxia did not allow Fairy Hongxia to continue speaking. She bowed and said, "Little sister Jiuxia greets big sister Hongxia. Little sister, please rise." Fairy Hongxia smiled as she helped Jiuxia up. "Becoming sworn sisters is not only that, we also have to report it to the heavens and earth, and let the heavens and earth bear witness for us." I will listen to elder sister's instructions. Jiu Xia's face turned red. Little sister does not know much about this. Li Zongbao naturally heard the cries of the winter geese in the cave. However, when he opened his eyes, he saw that it was Fairy Hong Xia and Jiu Xia who were becoming sworn sisters. He did not know what to say. The development of this matter was far beyond his imagination. It was even a little inconceivable. If only Zhuo Xia was here, how great would that be? Li Zongbao thought to himself for no reason. Xiaohua was not as unaffected as Jiu Xia had said. The shadow of the winter geese was at least 20 feet tall, and it covered the cave that was open temporarily. Just as Xiaohua had expected, the moment the shadow of the winter geese was formed, a cold aura mixed with a faint savage aura seeped out from the shadow, enveloping the entire cave. Furthermore, the shadow of the winter geese flapped its wings, and a surge of energy carried the drop of blood, as if it was about to fly out of the cave above the geese's head. Xiaohua's magic power surged, and he tried his best to control the spiritual fire, but he was unable to control the shadow. Xiaohua had already released over 1,000 strands of spirit thread, firmly entangling the shadow. However, he was still unable to stop the shadow from struggling. Sigh, if the 3rd grade flying shadow pill is so difficult to refine, then what about the 6th grade? What about the 9th grade? Xiaohua laughed bitterly. Looks like this 3rd batch of flying shadow pill is going to be wasted. It's really a pity for the 3rd drop of spirit blood. After all, Xiaohua was controlling the spiritual fire to use the demon realm's blood fusion technique, and his control was not too skillful. Although the shadow of the winter geese could not really escape from the capital star's formation, the fusion of the pill was at this moment. After this moment, the flying shadow pill would be wasted, and the spirit blood of the winter geese would also be wasted. Little yellow? Little white? Xiaohua thought for a moment, and felt that it was inappropriate. Little white was still weak and could not come out, and little yellow could only eat. He had never seen it spit out before. Moreover, there was Jiu Xia outside the cave, so how could Xiaohua expose these secrets in front of her? Just as Xiaohua was about to give up, his gaze fell on the drop of blood that was about to turn into green smoke under the shadow of the winter geese. Oh, can I give it a try? Xiaohua was a little hesitant, but soon after, he opened his mouth and a drop of essence blood flew out and landed right beside the remnant blood. In almost an instant, the other spiritual flame also flew out from Xiaohua's hand and charged into the essence blood. Jie. Within the cave, the cry of the winter geese had been heard for the umpteenth time. Not only did the cry not have a trace of weakness, it was even louder than before, as if the shadow of the winter geese had not been consumed much in the past few days. Little sister, what is Xiaohua doing? Fairy Hong Xia held Jiu Xia's small, boneless hand and asked in a low voice. Hee, big sister, why don't you use your spiritual sense to see for yourself? Jiu Xia said with a smile. There are no restrictions in his cave. That won't do. Fairy Hong Xia shook her head. This is Xiaohua's secret, and if I use my spiritual sense to check, it might affect his pill refining. Big sister is right. Jiu Xia nodded with a smile. Little sister has not checked before, and I don't know how to refine pills, so I don't know what he is doing. But thinking about it, Xiaohua is trying to subdue the spiritual bird's blood and send it into the flying shadow pill. The previous 2 times, it didn't take this long, right? Fairy Hong Xia was a little worried. And the previous 2 times, it was done in one go. Jiu Xia nodded. I'm afraid there is a problem this time. Now that the winter geese have been crying for a few days, the medicinal liquid in the cauldron must have reached its limit. If the cry of the geese is still there, this cauldron of pills will be wasted. Xiaohua is going to feel heartache now. Fairy Hong Xia laughed when she heard that Xiaohua was not in any danger. Big sister, this is the spiritual blood that little sister has been collecting for a long time. Little sister's heart is aching. Jiu Xia rebuked. Big sister only has Xiaohua in your heart. You don't care about little sister. Good. Fairy Hong Xia laughed. When there is a chance in the future, I will ask Xiaohua to make more for you. Hee hee, good. This is what Big Sister said. I will tell Xiaohua later. Jioxia laughed, and almost jumped up. Where was the awe-inspiring aura that she had when she killed 5 illusory swords with a single sentence? Seeing how happy Jioxia was, Fairy Hongxia was also happy in her heart, and a smile appeared on her face. Who wouldn't like such a cute little sister like Jioxia? Jie, at this moment, the winter geese cried out in grief. It was incomparably mournful. Following that, there was a series of flustered cries. Following that, there was a buzzing sound from the cauldron. Everything returned to silence. Although Fairy Hongxia did not know how to refine pills, when she heard the commotion, her heart was at ease. A strange expression appeared on Jioxia's face. This was a rarely seen expression on her face. Furthermore, ever since she met Xiaohua, this expression had appeared many times. However, this strange expression disappeared in a flash and a smile appeared on her face again. Nonsense. If this grade 3 flying shadow pill was refined, then wouldn't the grade 2 flying shadow pill be hers? No matter what angle she looked at it from, there was no way she would not want to refine this grade 3 pill. After another 9 days, a golden light shot up into the sky from within the cave and pierced through the mountain peak. After that, it shot up into the sky from the peak and did not stop for a long time. Within the cave, a few clear sounds could be heard, as though a water buffalo was sneezing. Suddenly, Xiaohua chanted a mantra and all the golden light disappeared. A strong medicinal fragrance rushed out, and Xiaohua appeared at the entrance of the cave with a smile on his face. Darling Xiao! Fairy Hongxia walked over quickly. Her steps were light and light. Although she might not be able to use her flying technique, her recovery over the past few days could already be estimated. This is for you. Xiaohua stretched out his hand. It was not the same as before where it was just a spiritual pill. Instead, it was a jade box with a yellow talisman pasted on it. I heard from little sister Jioxia that this spiritual pill was something that you insisted on refining. Fairy Hongxia said with heartache. Actually, the previous one was enough. Why did you have to waste your spiritual energy? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. Following which, he saw Jioxia sticking out her tongue from behind Fairy Hongxia. Her scarlet tongue was very eye-catching. This Jioxia is really good at reading people's expressions, Xiaohua praised. Naturally, he could not deny it. He looked at Fairy Hongxia and said, I did not take good care of you and caused you to be injured. Naturally, I have to do my best to help you recover. This grade 3 flying shadow pill is very beneficial to your future cultivation. How can I let it go? Darling Xiao, you are the best, Fairy Hongxia said while biting her cherry lips. Brother-in-law! Jioxia did not miss the opportunity to shout. Quickly let me see the pill image of this grade 3 flying shadow pill. Brother-in-law? Xiaohua was stunned. -11. Chapter 2801. Hee hee! Fairy Hongxia pursed her lips and smiled. I have already become sisters with Jioxia. Naturally, she has to call you brother-in-law. Are you a little disappointed? Naturally, the last sentence was already similar to a voice transmission. Ah? How could I? Xiaohua did not pay attention and almost let it slip. Halfway through, he immediately changed his words and said, Great, great! This is the best thing that has happened to me since I entered Huan country. Congratulations, Red Cloud! Xiaohua had an indescribable feeling in his heart. The mysterious Jioxia actually called him brother-in-law. Quickly give me the pill, brother-in-law! Jioxia was like a lively child as she jumped in front of Xiaohua and stretched out her hand to ask for it. Here, Xiaohua could only pass the jade box to Jioxia first. He then turned his head and asked, Red Cloud, the secret technique that Jioxia gave you, have you comprehended it? And previously I comprehended the second grade flying shadow technique. Fairy Hongxia's face had a worried expression. But Xiaohua actually refined the third grade flying shadow pill. I have no choice but to comprehend the third-grade flying shadow technique again. Xiaohua is making things difficult for me. Seeing that Fairy Hongxia was actually so cute, Xiaohua's heart was about to melt. He stretched out his hand, wanting to hold her hand. However, thinking that Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao were still at the side, he was afraid that Fairy Hongxia would be shy. Who knew that when Fairy Hongxia raised her hand, she would hold Xiaohua's hand? Her warm and soft hand was really Fairy Hongxia's sweetheart. Xiaohua's hand tightened as if he had grabbed onto happiness. The hard work of the past 100 days had already disappeared along with the golden light and the medicinal fragrance from earlier. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao did not pay attention to Fairy Hongxia and Xiaohua at all. Their gazes were the same as Jioxia's, landing on the jade box. Inside the jade box was a golden pill with a pigeon egg inside. There was a layer of faint golden brilliance on it. That brilliance was so dazzling that it was like the yellow sun on the horizon. And this golden brilliance was emitted from the faint golden threads within the pill. In addition to the golden threads, the surface of the golden core was covered in fine runes, just like the previous 2 flying shadow pills. These runes formed the image of a cold goose. As the 5-colored brilliance flashed in Jioxia's eyes, an indescribable expression appeared on his face. There was even a hint of greed in his expression, or perhaps it was a longing that accompanied it. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao were purely amateurs. They stared at it for a long time, but other than the golden light in their eyes, they didn't know what was so special about it. Xiao! Brother-in-law! Jioxia only opened her mouth after a long while. She stuck out her thumb and said, I don't know how to praise you. It seems like I can only give you don't know anything other than giving birth. I really can't think of any other title in this world that I can give you. Hee hee hee. Fairy Hongxia's face was slightly red. She pinched Xiaohua with one hand and covered her mouth with the other to laugh. Cough cough Loki, Loki! Xiaohua coughed twice and said, It's best not to use this shocking title. Otherwise, many cultivators won't have the face to appear in the cultivation world. Ha ha! Jioxia laughed happily. Her laughter flowed like a mountain spring into everyone's hearts. Everyone was infected and an indescribable joy was born from the bottom of their hearts. Even Li Zongbao revealed a rare smile. Sister, brother-in-law is really interesting. Jioxia almost wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. His third-grade flying shadow pill's quality has long surpassed the third grade. However, because it doesn't have Chaoying's spirit blood, it can't reach the 4th grade. However, the mysterious golden thread inside has already raised this pill to the outer grade. Outer grade? Xiaohua was also happy in his heart. However, after hearing Jioxia's evaluation of his pill, Xiaohua was a bit confused. The outer grade is beyond the evaluation of the 9th grade. Jioxia smiled and said, Just like the Wu Tsung pill and the 2nd grade flying shadow pill that brother-in-law refined earlier, they can all be classified as outer grade. However, the grades of these pills are too low, so there isn't any special distinction. How many spirit stones are these outer grade and inner grade spirit pills worth? Xiaohua's heart calmed down, and he revealed the face of a miser. Spirit stones? Jioxia asked with a smile that wasn't a smile. If little sister is willing to pay spirit stones, would brother-in-law be willing to sell this outer grade golden pill to little sister? Why, is it impossible? Xiaohua originally wanted to say, How is it possible? But he immediately changed his words. Hee hee, only an alchemy grandmaster like brother-in-law can have such boldness. Jioxia praised again. This inner-grade pill or outer-grade pill is a rare treasure. Who would take it out to trade without permission? Brother-in-law, have you ever seen a 1st-grade pill in the auction of the 3 kingdoms of cultivation? I really haven't. Xiaohua scratched his head and said doubtfully. Furthermore, this Xiao seems to have never heard of pills being divided into 9 grades. Jioxia did not answer his question but nodded and said, That's right. Can spirit stones be used to exchange for pills that don't even appear in the auction? Then without explaining, he turned to Fairy Hongxia and said, Sister, you're lucky. With this outer grade flying shadow pill, you can practice the third-grade flying shadow technique. This avatar will definitely be famous in Dongrain continent in the future. But, as you said, this avatar needs to be reforged. Using Xiantian true water to forge an ice phoenix avatar is a bit too difficult. Fairy Hongxia looked at the golden pill and said hesitantly, Darling Xiao, you refined this golden pill with great difficulty. Don't waste it. Hee, with brother-in-law here, what are you afraid of? Jiuxia chuckled and there was a mischievous look in that smile. Lonin does not give birth, Lonyang does not grow. Brother-in-law's name of terrifying phoenix is not for nothing, right? Fairy Hongxia's face turned red. She did not expect Jiuxia to be able to see through this. Xiaohua's face also turned red. Looking at the sky and the ground, Li Zongbao pointed to a corner in the distance and said to Xiao Mao, Junior brother Xiao, there seems to be something wrong with the Du Tian star array. You and I have been studying the array for a long time. Let's go and take a look. All right. Xiao Mao's face was also serious as he followed Li Zongbao. That, sister. Fairy Hongxia was a bit embarrassed, but she had to say it now. Darling Zhao's phoenix avatar disappeared. Ah? How can an avatar disappear? Once the avatar is activated, if it is forced to dissipate, to the cultivator's cultivation, that brother-in-law, you can still stand here? Jiuxia's smile froze. She seemed to have never heard of an avatar disappearing. Cough cough, that is indeed the case. Xiaohua could not explain in detail and said softly, My avatar seems to have fallen into the void. Amazing! Brother-in-law, you are really amazing. Jiuxia was speechless and gave him a thumbs up helplessly. Xiaohua was able to throw an avatar into the void. This was probably the first time Jiuxia had seen someone like that. Let's see if there is any other way first. Xiaohua smacked his lips and urged. There is indeed a way. Jiuxia smiled bitterly and said, The fusion of yin and yang is the best way to create an avatar. Sister, you have the innate primordial water here, so you must have the innate primordial fire. The best way to create the innate primordial fire is the best. That is why I thought of. At this point, Jiuxia shut up. Because Xiaohua was holding a golden magic bottle in which the innate primordial fire was flickering. Brother-in-law, do you have any other innate items? Jiuxia was a bit speechless. The more innate items of the 5 elements in this avatar, the better. Oh. Xiaohua raised his hand again and took out a ball of innate gold qi. He said embarrassedly, I only have these 3. Innate primordial wood and innate primordial earth. I really don't have any. Please excuse me. AI. Jiuxia sighed and shook her head. I finally understand. How could I forget about this? You should have it. After he finished speaking, he actually looked at Xiaohua with a profound look. Xiaohua was already used to Jiuxia's ability to predict the future. He did not pay attention to her gaze. Who knew that Jiuxia would raise her hand again and said, Take out your innate gold mother and innate jellyfish and let sister use them. Oh. Okay. Xiaohua hesitated and was about to take them out. Sister is really amazing. Fairy Hongxia saw Xiaohua nodding. How could she not know that Xiaohua actually had these things that she had never thought of before? She was really impressed by Jiuxia's ability to predict the future. Her eyes flashed with astonishment as she said, Xiaohua has never mentioned these things to me before. You actually said it out loud. If I did not hear you say that you have such talent, I would have thought that Xiaohua had told you before. Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said with a bitter face, These things are useless to you. Why would I tell you? It is even more impossible for me to tell Jiuxia. Hee. Fairy Hongxia laughed and said, This concubine knows. It is all because Jiuxia's ability is amazing. But Jiuxia waved her hand as if she did not have any intention of being complacent. She said, Brother-in-law, please don't. Oh? What do you want now? Xiaohua hurriedly said, I do not have any innate fire mother. Even if you beat me to death, I would not be able to take it out. He, brother-in-law, do not be anxious. Jiuxia did not have any intention of coveting Xiaohua's innate items. She explained, the Tao of the 5 elements are mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. This is even more so for the innate 5 elements. Innate jellyfish and innate gold mother can produce innate primordial water and innate gold qi. When these two things mutually reinforce each other, they can produce a bit of innate true wood. Brother-in-law also has innate true fire. When combined with innate gold mother, you can forcefully produce a bit of innate true earth. Sister's Dharma body only needs to be constructed with the innate 5 elements. It does not need innate fire mother. -11. Chapter 2802. Oh, I understand now. Xiaohua nods his head, but then he is suddenly shocked and says anxiously, This kind of Dharma body, doesn't that mean it has the innate 5 elements? Is that still a true blood Dharma body? Of course not. Jiuxia smiles like a crescent moon. This should be an innate spiritual body. Innate spiritual body? Xiaohua blinks his eyes and says in confusion. This name sounds very powerful, but what is so powerful about it? As for the specifics, I am not sure myself. At this moment, Jiuxia does not say anything, as if she is trying to whet Xiaohua's appetite. All I know is that this spiritual body can cultivate by itself. If there is a coincidence, and, just like your Dharma body, it can enter the void and be separated from sister's body. Who knows, it might be another external incarnation. This, so powerful! Xiaohua and Fairy Hongxia are both wild with joy. Is there still a need to say? Even if this spiritual body Dharma body cannot be separated from the body, if this spiritual body can cultivate in the future, wouldn't it be another Fairy Hongxia? In the future, if they were to fight with others, wouldn't the two of them fight together? Sister, you really have a good family background, right? Fairy Hongxia is really full of admiration for Jiuxia. She had already asked about Jiuxia's background, but Jiuxia did not say anything. Fairy Hongxia thought for a long time but still could not think of Jiuxia's background. Now it seems that Jiuxia might be a direct disciple of one of the big sects in the cultivation world. It's just SOSO. Jiuxia smiles. Compared to the so-called I know everything except giving birth, At this point, Jiuxia is stunned. It seems that only male cultivators can say such words. For a girl to say such words, it is extremely inappropriate. Ha! Xiaohua rarely sees Jiuxia's awkwardness and laughs. Sister, Jiuxia tugs on Fairy Hongxia's sleeve, unwilling to let it go. Cough. Fairy Hongxia glares at Xiaohua and rebukes. Sister is still underage. Look at how much she has learned from you. Sweat, Xiaohua curls his lips. If Jiuxia is underage, I am afraid that I am still a child. Let's go, sister. Sister, I will first tell sister the secret technique to refine the spiritual body Dharma body. Let those stinky men enjoy the wind outside. Jiuxia giggled as she pulled Fairy Hongxia into the cave, leaving the two beautiful figures in Xiaohua's line of sight. Junior brother Xiao. Xiaohua heard Li Zongbao's voice transmission beside his ear. This Jiuxia is full of oddities. Junior sister being so intimate with her, I'm afraid it's inappropriate. Sigh. Xiaohua walked towards the two people and said with a bitter smile. What can we do? Perhaps Hongxia has her own plans. She wasn't a simple-minded person, so she would just treat it as if nothing had happened. Furthermore, even if Hongxia falls into Jiuxia's trap, what can you and I do? This Jiuxia is unfathomable. Looks like this little girl doesn't have any bad intentions. Although Xiao Mao can hear the two's voice transmission, seeing Li Zongbao's seriousness and Xiaohua's helplessness, he immediately understands that Li Zongbao is telling Xiaohua the same thing that he has nagged him countless times. What do you know? Xiaohua glares at Xiao Mao. Your eyeballs are about to fall to the ground. Can you tell that she has any bad intentions? This. Xiao Mao actually blushes. Looks like Xiaohua is right. Senior brother, can you and Xiao Mao understand the array? If there is anything you don't understand, just say it. Xiaohua looks at the cave and asks. Li Zongbao's face shows a trace of awkwardness. Xiao Mao hurriedly says, Of course there is a lot that I don't understand. This is the capital star array. How can it be compared to an ordinary array? Big brother, quickly explain it to me. Senior brother Li can also tell me what you have learned. Then, the three brothers hid outside the cave and explained the capital star array in detail. Although the two of them were a little confused, it was 100 times better than trying to figure it out by themselves. Seeing that Li Zongbao, the number one person under the golden core stage, doesn't understand the array, Xiaohua is somewhat pensive. This capital star array in his heart is like a piece of cake, as if he has been comprehending it for a long time. Judging himself by others, Xiaohua understands that his aptitude is not inferior to Li Zongbao's, or his cultivation time is not shorter than Li Zongbao's. But during the Imperial Thundersex apprenticeship test, the Bone Age test, didn't it show that I am only 20 years old? Could it be that the Imperial Thundersex spells are not good enough? Xiaohua unconsciously thought of his background. For several days, Fairy Hongxia and Jiuxia did not come out. Xiaohua knows that the secret technique to condense a spiritual body is definitely not that simple. So, Xiaohua dug 2 more caves at the side. He hid in one of them to refine jade talismans, and left the other one for Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. He does not dare to let the 2 of them stand outside in the cold wind. Who would have thought that this wait would take more than 100 days? Xiaohua's technique of refining jade talismans is becoming more and more skillful. He actually managed to refine 2 sets of the hundreds of talismans of the capital star array. Moreover, he refined more than 10 talismans, patching up the flaws of the array. Xiaohua tested it a little. The power of the jade talismans is indeed much stronger than the talismans. Not only is the defensive power 40% stronger, the speed of setting up the array is also more than double. If I recall all the other jade talismans of the capital star array, I won't be afraid of anyone on the Dawn Rain continent with just this array. Xiaohua just thought of this, and he unconsciously felt a slight shock in his heart. Previously, he already had a thought, I can't be careless. The cultivator who sealed this young master must be incomparably powerful. Even with this star array, this young master was still not his opponent. Moreover, I've revealed too much in the Sword Dao battle. Just like what Li Zongbao said, even if I want to hide it, it will not be easy. I'm afraid I have to make other plans. Thinking of this, Xiaohua raised his eyes and looked in the direction of Mount Million Ming. That Ji Peng and Qin Xian must have come from Mount Million Ming, and then possessed Yin Ming here. How did they come here? Could it be that the teleportation array within the universal shifting token was able to construct a teleportation array? If that's the case, I can use this teleportation array to reach the other side of Mount Million Ming. No matter how high the opponent's cultivation is, he can't do anything to me. But second senior brother said it very clearly. This teleportation array must not be constructed successfully. Otherwise, Ji Ping will be here before I even reach there. Before this young master's enemy makes a move, this young master and second senior martial brother will be killed. Oh, Jian Luer! Thinking of this, Xiaohua was shocked. This period of time was extremely dangerous. He had thrown Jiang Luer into the space and ignored her. Even if he occasionally took things from the space, Jiang Luer was thrown in an extremely remote place. He did not think of her at all. Fortunately, when Xiaohua's consciousness entered the space, everything about Jiang Luer was still the same. Her face was not thin or fat, and it was still the same. Fortunately. Xiaohua breathed a sigh of relief. If anything happened to Jiang Luer here, I would not be able to explain it to senior sister. Brother-in-law, brother-in-law. At this moment, Jiu Xia's voice came from outside the cave. Alas, my cheap brother-in-law. Xiaohua smiled bitterly, responded, and flew out of the cave. Hee, brother-in-law's hands are not slow. In just a few days, you have actually created 2 cave residences. Jioxia laughed. Of course, I can't always stay outside and drink the northwest wind, Xiaohua said unhappily. He looked at the cave and said, How is Hongxia? Can she finish comprehending it? Of course. Jioxia smiled, stretched out her hand and said, Brother-in-law, you can give me the second-grade flying shadow pill. Xiaohua clapped his hands and took out the second-grade flying shadow pill and 3 drops of spiritual blood, which he wanted to give to Jioxia. I only want the second-grade flying shadow pill. Jioxia stretched out her hand, took the pills and said, The rest of them are useless to me. Just take it as a reward. Xiaohua knew that Jioxia was not willing to take more benefits from him. He was afraid that if she needed his help in the future, she would not be able to ask for his help. Immediately after, he sent a voice transmission. How confident are you in condensing the spiritual body? If it fails, will it have any effect on Hongxia? He. Jioxia smiled faintly and asked, Now that it has come to this, do you have any leeway to retreat? Xiaohua was startled and shook his head slightly. It seems that there is no leeway. Since there is no leeway, what's the use of asking so much? Jioxia looked at the cave that Xiaohua flew out of and said, I will go there to rest. You can do whatever you want. I've already told her everything. When Jioxia said this, her expression was very serious, as if she did not have any intention of joking. However, when Xiaohua heard the last sentence, his face turned red again. Facing this Jioxia who seemed to know everything, Xiaohua felt a lot of pressure in his heart. The secret of dual cultivation, especially the secret between the phoenix celestial body and the ice phoenix celestial body, this Jioxia knew. What else did she not know? There is no array in this cave. Even if I do something, it will be like a fishbone stuck in my throat. How can I do whatever I want? However, when Xiaohua walked into the cave, he realized that he was thinking too much. He saw Hongxia fairy flying in midair, her body slanted upwards. Her hands were spread open, and her perfectly round legs were slightly raised. Her sharp chin corresponded with her legs, and her posture was very strange. It was as if she was flying, but also as if she was dancing. However, on the surface of Fairy Hongxia's body, there was an inexplicable fluctuation of mana. This fluctuation flowed along the surface of Fairy Hongxia's body, from her chin to her arms, then from her arms to her back, to the tip of her feet, then from the tip of her feet to her lower abdomen, then back to her chin. -11. Chapter 2803. Xiaohua was in such a state, and Fairy Hongxia was even more so. Seeing the sound of the explosion fading, and the hurricane coming down, her eyes were filled with exhaustion and joy. At this moment, crack, 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 an extremely discordant sound was heard amidst the explosion, as if something had cracked. And this sound seemed to spread, rapidly spreading to Fairy Hongxia's entire Dharma body. This is bad! Hearing such a sound, how could Xiaohua not know that something had gone wrong? With a sweep of his divine will, he understood that the 5 elements item that had been gradually fusing together was now showing signs of cracks. Obviously, the fusion was not successful. What should we do? Xiaohua frowned. Fairy Hongxia was also panicking, but that panic only lasted for a moment. She stared straight at Xiaohua's face, and her body glowed with a bloody light. Shua! It was as if all the essence blood in her body had been poured into the ice phoenix embodiment, and all the crystals were mixed with a trace of blood. My wife is staking it all on this one throw! Xiaohua was anxious. He knew that Fairy Hongxia had started the process of condensing the crystals in advance, but he could not do anything to stop it. He could only nod slightly, as if to encourage Fairy Hongxia. Another sound rang out, and the ice phoenix embodiment danced, like a bloody shadow dancing in the air. The flying shadow secret technique was like this. The bloody light in the crystals trembled along with the ice phoenix embodiment, trying its best to condense the 5 elements item. However, the situation was not so optimistic. The power of the bloodline could not withstand it, And with the power of the 5 elements, the cracks of the 5 elements were getting bigger and bigger. Despair, deep and bottomless despair. Whether it was Fairy Hong Xia or Xiao Hua, they both had such a feeling in their hearts. There was a limit to human strength, and this was not a lie. Sometimes they felt that with just a little bit more, they could succeed. However, this little bit was like a natural moat. Even if there was Jiu Xia's mysterious flying shadow pill and flying shadow secret technique, even if there was Xiao Hua's rare innate golden mother and innate jellyfish, even if there was Hong Xia fairy and Xiao Hua's mutual love, even if the two of them were determined to die together. But all of this could not change the outcome of Fairy Hong Xia's embodiment disappearing. In fact, because of this effort, Fairy Hong Xia's physical body and cultivation would suffer even more serious damage. All their efforts had been for naught. Xiao Hua couldn't help but think of replacing Fairy Hong Xia, even though he knew that it was just wishful thinking. However, to have such thoughts was also good. Fairy Hong Xia could already feel that kind of love from Xiao Hua's anxiety. Fairy Hong Xia opened her mouth, as though she wanted to send a voice transmission. However, not a single word came out. It was as if she knew everything Xiao Hua also knew. She understood, Xiao Hua also understood. All the words in the world were superfluous. Let's leave it to fate. All of a sudden, Fairy Hong Xia came to a realization. Opportunities were something that could only be chanced upon and not sought after. How could an opportunity that could be created be called an opportunity? Xiao Hua naturally felt the change in Fairy Hong Xia's gaze. Although his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife, he still smiled slightly. The husband follows the wife's lead, this was probably the case. But just as Fairy Hong Xia was about to give up, the golden light within her avatar shone brightly. Fairy Hong Xia was stunned. However, her face immediately lit up with joy. Within the blood-red light, the golden threads from the flying shadow elixir were now emerging from the blood-red light. They entwined around the 5 elemental items. The golden light from the golden threads was so strong that it condensed the 5 elemental items together. Great! Xiao Hua was really ecstatic. He didn't expect that the method he used to refine the flying shadow elixir could still be used now. He looked at Fairy Hong Xia again. Her eyes were tightly shut, and she ignored Xiao Hua. The entire Ice Phoenix avatar began to tremble violently, and slowly sank into her physical body. In just a moment, Fairy Hong Xia's pure white body emitted a holy light. Within this light, the hair that had been burned off earlier slowly grew back. Moreover, within this light, a sparkling and translucent Ice Phoenix celestial body slowly rose up. It slowly spread its wings and slowly covered the entire mountain cave. Caw! The Ice Phoenix let out a soft, gentle cry that sounded both arrogant, and as if it was whispering into one's ear. Great! When Xiao Hua heard this cry, he felt as if a huge rock had fallen from his heart. He knew that the most difficult second stage had passed. Although there were still many secret techniques and techniques to refine the spirit body avatar in the future, those were secondary. Sure enough, Fairy Hong Xia no longer maintained her previous posture. Instead, she began to make all sorts of weird movements in the air. At the same time, the Ice Phoenix celestial body was also constantly changing. From time to time, it would let out a phoenix cry as if it was extremely happy. Another 81 days passed, and Xiao Hua didn't leave even a single step. He was always by Fairy Hong Xia's side. Not to mention cultivating, he couldn't even bear to blink his eyes. In the end, the Ice Phoenix avatar suddenly expanded in midair and entered Fairy Hong Xia's body. Fairy Hong Xia's face was filled with joy as she threw herself into Xiao Hua's embrace. A feeling of nirvana and rebirth arose in her heart, and it filled Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua hugged Fairy Hong Xia, and his heart was filled with emotions. How could cultivation be done in a day? How could it be smooth sailing? Such a choice between life and death would probably be encountered frequently in the future. When Xiao Hua accompanied Fairy Hong Xia out of the cave, it was already a few days later. The entire valley was empty. Regardless of whether it was Jiu Xia, Li Zongbao, or Xiao Mao, they were all hiding in their own caves to cultivate. Even if Xiaohua didn't set up the capital star array, no one would be able to spy on them. Xiaohua's spiritual sense swept out, and the three of them were startled and walked out of their caves. Congratulations, elder sister! Jiu Xia skipped to Fairy Hong Xia's side, held her hand, and said with a smile, "All right, I have to thank younger sister for your secret technique." Fairy Hong Xia's face also revealed a smile as she said gratefully, "There's no need to thank me." Jiu Xia hurriedly waved her hand. "I'm still waiting for brother-in-law to help me. Don't worry. If you have any orders, this Xiao will do it." Since Jiu Xia had said it so clearly, how could Xiaohua not express it? Now that things had developed to this point, even if Xiaohua didn't want to help, he probably wouldn't be able to decline, right? Congratulations, senior sister! Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao also came over and congratulated each other. Xiao Mao said in astonishment, "Senior sister, you seem to be a little different from before. Not to mention that you are even more beautiful than before. This aura, this is indescribable. Is that so?" Fairy Hong Xia was the same as other female cultivators. She loved to hear others say that she was beautiful, and she couldn't help but be happy. "Of course," Jiu Xia said proudly. "Elder sister is now a spiritual body. This spiritual body is formed from the Xiantian 5 elements, and the spiritual body is linked to the bloodline. Elder sister's physique and aptitude will also change under the influence of the spiritual body. Right now, this is just the beginning, and it is like changing to a new physical body. In the future, it will be even more different." As she said that, Jiu Xia seemed to intentionally or unintentionally glance at Xiaohua. Indeed, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. Xiaohua suddenly felt his face heating up. "And a new physical body, that is indeed true." Xiaohua almost wanted to agree. "Unfortunately, brother-in-law only has 3 of the 5 elements. If you have all 5 elements, elder sister's spiritual body will be complete. Elder sister's physical body will be even more." Hearing this, Fairy Hong Xia pursed her lips and said, "This is enough. There is no need to talk about complete or not. Without your blessing, elder sister can refine her spiritual body again." "Hee, elder sister's state of mind is so good." Jiu Xia laughed. "This state of mind will allow you to go the furthest on the path of cultivation." Fairy Hong Xia laughed. This state of mind was not obtained for free, it was exchanged with her life. "Oh, by the way, elder sister, this flying shadow technique was given to elder sister by me. Elder sister, other than not being able to spread it to others, there is no need to avoid it from your family." Jiu Xia winked at Fairy Hong Xia. "And, elder sister knows." Fairy Hong Xia blushed. However, Xiaohua pursed his lips. He knew what Jiu Xia meant, but he didn't say it out loud. He looked at the sky and said, "Miss Jiu Xia, we have been waiting here for more than a year. Can we go to Million Mountain Meng now? If you want to go, then go. I just want to follow elder sister," Jiu Xia said with a smile. "And please keep this capital star formation that belongs to you so that we can hurry on with our journey." Xiaohua emphasized the words capital star formation that belongs to you. "All right." Jiu Xia laughed and jumped up. She kept the capital star formation's talismans one by one with great familiarity. It seemed like she had already comprehended it and wanted to keep it. "Sister, how do we go to Million Mountain Meng next?" Fairy Hong Xia knew Jiu Xia's ability and had to ask. "Elder sister, just follow the previous arrangement." Jiu Xia looked at her talismans happily and said casually. She was like a young girl who had obtained her favorite item. She only had her mind on the talismans, why would she care about others? All right, Fairy Hong Xia was also helpless. She ordered Xiao Mao to bring out the drifting cloud flying ship. Everyone boarded the flying ship. Fairy Hong Xia looked at the direction and led everyone towards the drifting cloud lake. -11. Chapter 2804. Fairy Hong Xia never expected that the journey to Million Ming Mountains would be peaceful, and she was even prepared to fight. However, the journey from Sword Edge Peak to Drifting Cloud Lake was not a peaceful one. Although Fairy Hong Xia had Xiao Hua and the mysterious Jiu Xia by her side, she still felt an indescribable fear in her heart. Yes, it was the same as what Xiao Hua saw before he met Jiu Xia. Millions of Meng Mountain soul cultivators riding on soul beasts were fighting with the sword cultivators of Huan Country near Sword Edge Peak. Although the scale of the battle was not as large as the one between Dao sect cultivators and sword cultivators, there were many battlefields. Every battlefield had thousands or even tens of thousands of people. Adding them all up, Huan Country had sent a lot of swordsmen. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao controlled the drifting cloud airship and weaved between the battlefields. From time to time, they would be attacked by the flying swords of the sword cultivators and even the soul weapons of the soul cultivators. Fortunately, Xiao Hua was on board the airship. The flying swords and soul weapons were easily blocked by Xiao Hua and covered the group as they flew towards Drifting Cloud Lake. After passing through the battlefields of the soul cultivators and sword cultivators, there were new changes on the icy plains. When Fairy Hong Xia flew over from Drifting Cloud Lake, although she was in a hurry, their impression was that there were only barren mountains and icy plains below the airship. They did not see any swordsmen of Huan Country. But now, there were many figures. There were even some simple wooden huts and sheds built on the side of the icy lake. Fairy Hong Xia and the rest could tell with their divine sense that these people were no less than the sword cultivators of Huan Country. They were the kind of soul cultivators who looked dark and thin, with strange runes on their bodies and strange headwear on their heads. What is going on? Fairy Hong Xia was completely stunned. When the airship stabilized, she turned to Li Zongbao and asked. Li Zongbao also frowned. He was not like Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua did not care about the great battle of Dao and sword and even turned a deaf ear to it. However, Li Zongbao was different. His master was a Jinan master in the conference hall, and he was on duty as a Jinan. He played a decisive role in the great battle of Dao and sword. Therefore, Li Zongbao's vision, thinking, and planning were higher than Xiao Hua's. Of course, it could also be said that his scruples and considerations were different from Xiao Hua's. If he were to encounter Tu Hong, his methods would definitely be different. Even if he could kill Tu Hong's cultivation, he would definitely not assassinate him, because killing Tu Hong would cause irreversible damage to the war between Dao cultivators. Naturally, this was also the reason why Fairy Hong Xia looked at Li Zongbao instead of Xiao Hua. The sword cultivators of Huan Country seemed to be planning far ahead. Li Zongbao sighed. The change in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth will not only affect my Dao sect, but also the sword cultivators of Huan Country. Not only are they eyeing the territories of the 3 kingdoms of true cultivators, they are also eyeing millions of Meng Mountains. Looks like they have suffered a setback, and were even attacked by millions of soul cultivators from Meng Mountains. This is what they call trying to steal a chicken only to lose the rice used to lure it. Alas, that's right. The change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is no less than an abnormal disaster for us cultivators. All of us want to break through before the change is complete, and go as far as we can. During this period of time with Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao had heard a lot of things from Li Zongbao, so he had some insights. Looks like the sword cultivators of Huan Country are even more anxious than us. Their Huan Country has very few spirit stone veins to begin with, and after failing to seize the spirit veins of the 3 kingdoms of true cultivators, they are now eyeing the soul cultivators. Strange. Seeing Fairy Hong Xia nod her head slightly, Xiao Hua was puzzled. Why aren't millions of soul cultivators from Meng Mountains attacking Huan Country? Are all of you thinking that the sword cultivators are invading Meng Mountains? Hee, junior brother. Although you see the soul cultivators invading Huan Country, there is no reason for them to invade Huan Country. Li Zongbao glanced at the silent Jiu Xia and tried to explain to Xiao Hua. Facing Jiu Xia, who was known to be everywhere, Li Zongbao felt a little guilty. What do you mean? Xiao Hua blinked his eyes as if he didn't understand. It's very simple. First, junior brother, take a look at the climate around here. Is it different from the climate when we were fighting the swordsmen? Li Zongbao said patiently. Oh, yes. Xiao Hua nodded. The days here are very long, and the nights are also very long. We can have a good sleep. Pfft. Fairy Hong Xia didn't say anything, but Jiu Xia laughed first. Her curved eyes were like an intoxicating deep pool. That's one thing. Another thing is that it's not as cold as before. There are ice lakes and vegetation on the icy plains, Li Zongbao said with a smile. This means that the closer we are to Ming Mountains, the warmer the weather. Why do you think millions of soul cultivators from Ming Mountains don't live in such a good place, but come to Huan country where not even a blade of grass grows? Indeed. Xiao Hua nodded. Li Zongbao was right. This is secondary. Li Zongbao hesitated for a moment, then said, As far as I know, soul cultivators don't rely on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth or spirit stones to cultivate. The changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth have no effect on soul cultivators. Why would millions of soul cultivators from Ming Mountains attack Huan country at this time for no reason? If they could break into Huan country, they would have done so long ago. Huan country's swordsmen have been confronting soul cultivators for many years, and have never been at a disadvantage. If it weren't for the war between the two sides, they might not have been chased to this place. Moreover, in my opinion, when the war in Huan country comes to an end, Huan country's swordsmen will be able to concentrate on dealing with soul cultivators. The millions of soul cultivators from Ming Mountains will be blocked by Sword Edge Peak at most. If that's the case, the millions of soul cultivators from Ming Mountains may not be able to defeat Sword Edge Peak. Xiao Mao laughed. If Huan country is like that, those who wear such revealing clothes will definitely be frozen into popsicles. Miss Jiu Xia, do you think I'm right? Li Zongbao said and looked at Jiu Xia. Oh? These? Jiu Xia narrowed her eyes and smiled. These are all the thoughts of you stinky men. I don't know. I'm just thinking about how to get brother-in-law to help me. Once brother-in-law solves my big problem, I'll be free of worries. Brother-in-law even gave me a second-grade flying shadow pill. I'm still thinking about using it. Oh. Li Zongbao was a little disappointed, but he didn't ask any more questions. He turned to Fairy Hong Xia and said, Junior sister, if that's the case, I'm afraid our route to Drifting Cloud Lake will have to be slightly modified. I understand. Fairy Hong Xia nodded. If we follow the previous route, we'll definitely encounter many soul cultivators. Their soul techniques are unpredictable. Although we have Xiao Mao to protect us, it'll still be troublesome. Fairy Hong Xia took out a jade amulet and looked at it carefully for a while. Then she pointed at it and said, Let's go in that direction. Understood. Xiao Mao replied. He then activated the flowing cloud flying ship and left. -11. Chapter 2805. Xiao Hua sat on the airship in a daze. He really couldn't understand what was the difference between going in one direction and going in another in this high altitude. Moreover, how could they come and go as they pleased in such an unfamiliar place? As Fairy Hong Xia had said, the number of soul cultivators they had encountered along the way was much lower than it had been before. Xiao Hua was speechless. He wanted to ask about it, but when he saw Jiu Xia's knowing smile, he thought, fine, let's not ask about it, okay. Drifting Cloud Lake was actually not a lake, but a huge deep pit. There seemed to be something strange about this deep pit. There was a lot of light smoke seeping out from the bottom and walls of the pit, covering the entire deep pit. Moreover, the light smoke was coming out from the pit and slowly drifting in the air like a cloud. That was why it was named Drifting Cloud Lake. It was night when Xiao Hua and the others arrived at Drifting Cloud Lake. The weather was a little gloomy, but it was unknown whether it was because of the dark clouds or because it was not yet time. There were no stars in the sky, and everything was quiet. Only the occasional bonfire on the ground gave out a few rays of light. Several people sat on the airship and watched the light smoke dance in the air like countless beautiful women. After admiring it for a moment, they controlled the airship to glide in the night, flying toward the mountain range in the distance of drifting Cloud Lake. Eh? There's someone here? Xiaohua stared at the mountain range in the distance like a monster. He felt a strange feeling in his heart, but suddenly, he turned his head and looked to the right of the airship. Everyone was shocked and turned their heads as well. Several divine senses swept in that direction at the same time. Sure enough, a few dark figures suddenly appeared in midair, heading in the same direction as Li Zongbao. As Li Zongbao and the others scanned the area with their divine will, those few figures were alerted as well, and sent their divine will over as well. Seeing that there was actually a flying boat with a few Dao sect cultivators on it, the few figures were stunned. Obviously, they didn't expect to see people here, let alone Dao sect cultivators. Looking at the figures hovering in the air, Xiaohua smiled. These people were all dressed in black, not in sword attire. However, there were faint, almost invisible sword lights flashing under their feet. If they were not sword cultivators, who could they be? What was the purpose of these sword cultivators heading to Million Meng Mountains in the middle of the night? Just thinking about it, Xiaohua felt that it was interesting. It's him! At this moment, Li Zongbao gritted his teeth with hatred. Oh? Who is he? Xiaohua was a little curious. Although these people were very far away, when he scanned them with his divine perception, he found that their faces were unfamiliar. Xiaohua had never seen them before. During the Battle of the Sword Tomb, Lu Ruochang laid down the fourth sword formation of the Four Directions sword formation. Fairy Hongxia also came to a realization as she whispered. The fourth array is a spirit array. The person in charge of the array is the one in front. That day, he came with the intention of killing all the disciples of the Dao sect who survived the spirit-devouring array. However, the sword catacomb changed, and the sword cultivator's four-square sword formation was disrupted by Junior Uncle Wu Ming's pregnant baby, and that strange dragon roar. The soul formation was broken before it could be used. Who knows where the soul cultivator in charge of the formation went? Xiao Mao gritted his teeth. I didn't expect to see him here. He's a swordsman, not a soul warrior. Xiaohua nodded. But it seems like he knows soul techniques. They're coming. Xiao Mao was a little nervous, as if he still had some lingering fear of what happened in the sword catacomb. To kill or not to kill? Xiaohua didn't have any other thoughts, and only asked coldly. This? Although Li Zongbao had a deep impression of Yiyu, but, after all, after Yiyu had appeared, he had not started killing the Dao sect's disciples before being messed up by Xiaohua. Speaking of which, Yiyu had not really contributed in the great battle of the Sword Tomb. What troubled Li Zongbao the most was that they had come to the Huan Kingdom under the slogan of gaining experience. They had even said that they had already left the Great War of Dao and Sword, and that they could not be viewed as enemies just because of the Great War of Dao and Sword. But now that they had met their old enemies on the battlefield, how could they go back on their words and draw their weapons to meet them? Fairy Hongxia seemed to have thought of this as well, and looked at Xiaohua with a troubled expression. To kill or not to kill? Xiaohua frowned. It's up to you. Let's wait and see. Fairy Hongxia sighed, and ordered Xiao Mao to stop the flying boat in midair. In the night, Yi Yu and the others almost blended into the night, and quietly flew to the front of the flying boat. Yi Yu stopped a few feet away, and cupped his hands. Everyone, I'm Yi Yu, I wonder if you... Eh? At this point, Yi Yu paused, and was a little surprised. But then he asked curiously. I seem to have seen you before? Could it be that you participated in the sword catacomb battle? Hee Yi Yu. Your eyesight is not bad. Li Zongbao took half a step forward, and stood at the edge of the flying boat. He said coldly, We are the Dao sect disciples who survived the square sword formation. I'm Li Zongbao from the Utopia faction. Previously, in the spirit-devouring array, I saw you standing on the soul weapon heroically. I see. Yi Yu's tone had returned to its previous calmness, and he said lightly, That was then, and this is now. Back then, you and I were enemies, and any means were not excessive. It's normal for me to kill you in the soul weapon formation, or for you to kill me. And now you all are you here to tour the Heng country? If this ye were to kill all of you, wouldn't that be bullying the weak? Now that you've come here, it seems that you have this idea. Xiao Mao sneered. Are you also a disciple of the Utopia faction? Yu glanced at Xiao Mao and said coldly, Why would I want to kill you? It's just a piece of cake. How can a few cultivators in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage be a match for my third-grade illusory sword? Also, there's a mysterious soul cultivation art? Xiao Mao also retorted sarcastically. You're a rare genius who cultivates both sword and soul. Not at all, I'm not as good as you. Yu sneered. A kid in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage of the Utopia faction dares to be arrogant in front of me. If it weren't for your traveling, I would have killed you here. I'm Xiao Mao from the Xuanyan school. Xiao Mao sneered. If you want to kill me, just do it. Don't find any excuses. Xiao Mao from the Xuanyan school. Nameless people. Yu glanced at Xiao Hua, Hongxia Ferry, and Jiu Xia, and asked indifferently, Who are you? We're even more nameless people. Xiao Hua said lazily. You've never heard of us even if we tell you, so it's better not to say it. All right. I've never had the habit of forcing others. Yi was not angry. He just cupped his hands and said, Millions of Meng mountains are just ahead. Even sword cultivators like us don't dare to enter without permission. If you want to travel, you can stop here. Sword cultivators don't dare to enter without permission, but what about you? Are you going to millions of Meng mountains? Xiao Hua asked with a smile. You don't need to worry about where I'm going. Yi sneered. You should worry about yourselves. I'm curious. Now that the Heng country is at war with the soul cultivators of millions of Meng mountains, what are you planning to do by entering millions of Meng mountains at night? Could there be another soul formation in millions of Meng mountains? Li Zongbao asked. Do you want to die? Yi sneered, a fierce look flashing in his eyes. Although I don't bully the weak, if I'm provoked, I won't show mercy even if it's a senior, let alone a junior. Here Yi smiled bitterly, waved his hand and said, Why am I telling you so much? Whether millions of Meng mountains are auspicious or inauspicious, you know as well as I do. I'm just advising you out of kindness because I was forced to kill some creatures in the sword catacomb battle. As for where you go, it's none of my business. After saying that, he turned around and waved his hand, leading a few people who were dressed in black like him and whose faces were almost unrecognizable, flying towards millions of Meng mountains. This Yu seems interesting. Xiao Mao was a little stunned. It doesn't seem as fierce as I imagined. Could it be that he was really forced to do it in the sword catacomb battle? Or, Tisk, just listen to his nonsense. Li Zongbao sneered. How can a soul cultivator who can control souls be easy to deal with? If that's the case, why would Lu Ruocheng put him in the last layer of the Four Directions sword formation? The original plan of the soul formation was to kill all the cultivators of my Dao sect. Li Zongbao is right. Jiu Xia, who had been silent for a while, said with a smile. You've been in the sword domain for a few years and killed so many third-grade illusory swords, and Xiao Hua was able to escape from the hands of a transformed sword. This you didn't care about it before, but now that he met you, how could he not know where you came from? How could he not plan how to deal with you? Your fierce reputation forced him to take the initiative to come here. He was afraid that you would take the initiative to attack him, and he felt that he couldn't win against you. That's why he talked to you as a powerhouse, to make you feel that you can't fight with him. That's true. Xiao Mao suddenly realized. If it weren't for Senior Brother Li's kindness. Xiao Hua sneered. Who cares what he said? Kill them all. It's not that easy. Jiu Xia smiled. Before he came, he had already planned it out. Didn't you hear him mention your training? First, he cut off the reason for you to attack him. This person is so cunning. Fairy Hongxia was shocked. He only stopped in midair for a moment, and he actually thought of so many things. This person is really powerful. In the future, when we fight with him, we have to be careful. That's all there is to it. Xiaohua sneered. If it was me, I would directly kill him without a second word. Brother-in-law, Jiuxia rebuked. Sister is right. Things in this world can't be solved completely by killing. Just like this sword battle, why don't you just take out your transformed sword and nascent soul, and you kill me and I kill you? Why do you have to separate Jindan and illusory swords, nascent soul and transformed sword? Why do you need spirit stone veins and other schemes to lure the snake out of its hole? -11. Chapter 2806. Jiuxia spoke up for Fairy Hongxia, but Xiaohua and the rest did not know how to reply. This was because Jiuxia was always able to convince people with her words, leaving them speechless. Xiaohua was helpless and said half-heartedly, "However, all schemes and tricks are useless in front of cultivation and strength. Brother-in-law is right. But in this world, who dares to say that their strength is unrivaled?" Jiuxia seemed to be hurt by Xiaohua's words as she said faintly, "Even those who can step into the tribulation stage and Mahayana stage would not dare to be as arrogant as brother-in-law. After all, there is always someone better than you. If you are careless..." Jiuxia's voice was so sad that everyone felt sorry for her. Fairy Hongxia quickly reached out her hand and said, "Sister, sigh. It's all my fault." Jiuxia quickly plastered a smile on her face as she looked at Yiyu, who was disappearing into the night, and said, "Of course, if brother-in-law was facing this weak soul cultivator, he would be able to say the same thing." Jiuxia's forced smile made everyone's heart soften. No one had the heart to say anything. Jiuxia blinked her eyes and said, "However, this is the time when sword cultivators and soul cultivators are fighting. Yiyu is heading to Million Meng Mountains in the middle of the night. Brother-in-law, aren't you going to follow him?" Xiaohua and the rest came back to their senses. After thinking for a while, he smiled bitterly and said, "This Yiyu is so mysterious. Although I am not afraid of him, there is no reason for me to go looking for trouble. Besides, he is a swordsman. His dealings with soul cultivators have nothing to do with me. We still have important matters to attend to." Fine. Little sister was a little curious at first. "However, since elder sister and brother-in-law are not going, I will not go either," Jiuxia said with a smile. Her smile made everyone happy. "Let's wait for a while." Fairy Hongxia waved her hand and said, "We will enter Million Meng Mountains after Yiyu leaves. Can't we go somewhere else?" Xiaohua casually pointed at other places. "Aren't they all mountains? There is no difference. Million Meng Mountains is a taboo for sword cultivators and soul cultivators. There must be something powerful about it. That is what is recorded in the jade of my Kai family. It is better to follow orders." Fairy Hongxia shook her head slightly, denying Xiaohua's risk. "Big brother, after thinking about it, I feel that this night rain is a little strange." While they were waiting, Xiao Mao whispered to Xiaohua, "He is a sword cultivator, a great enemy of ours. Although he has some misgivings and doesn't dare to attack us, Millions of Meng Mountains is a dangerous place. How could he kindly warn us? He's probably looking forward to us dying here, isn't he? I reckon he's just a hypocrite." Fairy Hongxia whispered back, "This night rain. He wants us to follow him into Million Meng Mountains," Jiuxia said calmly. "How is that possible?" Xiao Mao was dumbfounded. "No matter how stupid we are, we can't possibly follow him." "That's right, this is where Night Rain's trick lies," Jiuxia said. "Since we are standing in front of Drifting Cloud Lake, there are two possibilities. One is that we are just passing by, and the other is that we are going to enter Millions of Meng Mountains. However, there are two possibilities for entering Millions of Meng Mountains. One is that we already know the route, and the other is that we are here by chance. Then, if it is an ordinary enemy who wants to take our lives, but is afraid of dying, he will naturally have to borrow Millions of Meng Mountains. But everyone knows how dangerous Millions of Meng Mountains are. Even if he wants to bewitch us, we won't enter Millions of Meng Mountains. Therefore, the enemy didn't even mention Millions of Meng Mountains, and was even vague about his purpose." And just now, Night Rain didn't even hesitate to tell us that millions of Ming Mountains is in front of us, and that it is extremely dangerous. He doesn't want us to take the risk. Firstly, it gives us the demeanor of an elder, and secondly, it's a way to show off. He can go to such a dangerous place, but we can't. If there are people with extreme personalities, they will definitely rush into millions of Ming Mountains on impulse. Of course, we are going to enter millions of Ming Mountains, but we don't necessarily have a safe route. Now that he has warned us in advance, the hint in his words is that if he can enter millions of Ming Mountains, he has a safe route. Even if we don't want to go the same way as him, we might already agree with his route in our hearts, and most likely follow him in. Outside of millions of Ming Mountains, he might not be able to deal with brother-in-law's divine ability, but once we enter, he might have a way to deal with us. We are going to enter millions of Ming Mountains, so of course we have a route. Why would we follow him? Xiao Mao said disdainfully. It wasn't easy for him to have a chance to refute Jiu Xia. He can't read our minds. Of course, he won't know what we are thinking, Jiu Xia said with a smile. Why doesn't he try? Besides, if we don't follow him, he will know that we are really going to millions of Ming Mountains, and have other matters to attend to. We are not just passing by, and we are not going to train in Huan Kingdom like you said before, right? So, that's the reason. Fairy Hongxia was suddenly enlightened. Night Rain's words were full of schemes. Even people like Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao didn't seem to think so much. But everyone was confused again. Li Zongbao asked, "Are we that important? But even if we don't have a route in advance, we won't go with him," Xiao Mao said, still unconvinced. "Maybe." Jiu Xia shrugged. His manner was similar to Xiao Hua's, but he looked much more carefree than Xiao Hua. He is just taking a gamble. Whether you can go or not, he might not even care. Xiao Mao was speechless. Jiu Xia was not easy to convince. Besides, this is just some idle chatter while we are waiting. I hope you don't mind it." After Jiu Xia concluded, Xiao Mao almost fell to the ground. Let's go," Fairy Hongxia urged at an inappropriate time. "Night Rain has nothing to do with us. No matter what he is thinking, we have nothing to do with him. Don't bother with him." "All right." Xiao Mao was a little unwilling, but until now, he still couldn't pierce through Jiu Xia's mask of omniscience. He had no choice but to follow Jiu Xia's instructions and fly towards millions of Ming Mountains. Just as Jiu Xia said, after Night Rain flew into millions of Ming Mountains, he didn't go far. Instead, he used his divine ability and hid somewhere, as if he was waiting for Xiao Hua and the others. After a long time, one of the subordinates became impatient. He asked tactfully, "Master, why are we waiting here? If Master is willing, you could have just killed these Dao sect cultivators at Drifting Cloud Lake. Why do you have to go through so much trouble?" "Humph! What do you know?" Yu laughed icily, but there was no trace of impatience on his face. "These Dao sect cultivators are clearly the terrifying Phoenix and the rest who have recently become famous in the Sword region. I don't have any confidence in being able to kill them. Can you do it?" Even with Master's ability, you don't have the confidence." "How can we do it?" That person smiled charmingly and whispered, "However, Master's eyesight is really sharp. You only saw these people once in the Sword Catacomb battle, but you have such a deep impression of them. You really make us admire you." "Humph, what do you know?" Night Rain sneered. "During the Sword Catacomb battle, there were hundreds of thousands of Dao sect cultivators. How can I recognize each and every one of them? I'm just trying to deceive them. If I don't take the initiative to go over, they will really attack. The situation is worrying." "How is that possible?" Another swordsman was unwilling to fall behind. He hurriedly came over and whispered, "I heard from the side that Master has been enduring silently. I've made preparations to kill them all." "You!" Night Rain sneered. "I'm afraid even 10 of you are no match for them. But they saw our whereabouts. How can we let them go?" The swordsman from before was somewhat puzzled. Perhaps we don't have to kill them. They will die on their own. At this point, Knight Rain's expression was somewhat absent-minded as he looked into the distance. Master, do you think they will follow us? Another person asked with some apprehension. I'd rather they follow us. Knight Rain hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice. Then, he said in an even lower voice, if they don't follow us, then it will be troublesome. However, after waiting for a long time, Xiaohua's airship still hadn't appeared in their field of vision. Yu didn't dare to release her divine sense, so after thinking for a moment, she ordered another person. Go back and check their whereabouts. Quickly report back. Yes. That person did not dare to delay. He hurriedly stepped on his flying sword and flew into the distance. Not long after, that person turned back. Knight Rain obviously attached great importance to this matter. He hurriedly asked, How is it? Master! There are no traces of those cultivators near Drifting Cloud Lake. If they did not leave Drifting Cloud Lake and go to the other side of Sword Domain, then they must have entered Million Mountain Meng. Humph, how could they have gone to Drifting Cloud Lake for the so-called travel? Knight Rain sneered. It seems that he has discovered the secret. He has already come to Million Mountain Meng to find the clues of that year. Master. The few people were somewhat puzzled. Forget it. Since he dares to chase after us, how can I let him go? Knight Rain sneered. How many years has it been? Finally. At this point, Knight Rain stopped abruptly. He looked at the sky and said coldly, Let's go, we are going to Shibai Inner Stockade. Master. Without waiting for Knight Rain to fly up, the two swordsmen hurriedly said, Shibai Inner Stockade, is it a place where Master can go now? Right now, Million Mountain Meng is at war with Sword Domain. It is already not easy for Master to come to Million Mountain Meng. If you come in contact with the people of Shibai Inner Stockade, you will be easily used by the other swordsmen of Sword Domain. That's right, Master. It was not easy for our Flying Dragon Sword sect to revive in Sword Domain. It was not easy for us to get the dragon platform in our hands again. This great situation did not come easily. You must think more about it. When Knight Rain heard this, he also hesitated. Besides, Master does not see G-Man for the new year. G-Man did not seem to have summoned Master. If Master does not summon G-Man, I am afraid it will be disadvantageous to Master. -11. Chapter 2807. Humph, she's just a G-Man. Does she really think she's a princess? Yu sneered. I've only taken a fancy to. Hee, my lord, you're thinking too much. Before Yu could finish, another swordsman hurriedly interrupted him. We have an important matter to attend to today. My lord, please think about it carefully. Fine. Yu frowned slightly and whispered. 6. You have some connections in the Ming Mountains. I'll entrust this matter to you. Find out where these cultivators are going and follow them closely. Remember, don't let them discover you and... Then, he whispered a lot more. Hearing this, the other swordsman avoided him, not daring to listen carefully. The swordsman named 6 listened for a long time and nodded a few times. Then, he stepped on his sword and left. Yu and the others continued to move forward, but obviously, Yu was not as calm as before. Occasionally, he would look back, as if he was thinking about something. Little did Xiaohua and his men know that their trip to Ming Mountains had actually caused Yu a great confusion. The 5 of them had been flying on the flying ship for nearly half a day, but they still didn't see any ambush from Yu and his men. When they saw a mountain range filled with withered branches in front of them, they stopped the flying ship. Fairy Hongxia looked ahead and pursed her lips. It seems we shouldn't enter the Meng Mountains like this, right? Haha, of course. Xiaohua looked at himself, then at the others, and laughed. We are obviously cultivators of the Dao sect. Won't we be targeted if we enter the Meng Mountains? But what if we change? Xiao Mao was a little distressed. I've never seen the appearance of the soul cultivators in the Meng Mountains. But at this point, A strange expression appeared on Xiao Mao's face. Who said they had never seen them before? Along the way, they had seen many soul cultivators and swordsmen fighting each other. How could they not know what a soul cultivator looked like? However, if they had to dress up in such a strange manner, how could they do it? Can we? Li Zongbao was still a little hopeful. If we sneak in like this, they might not know. Let's change our appearance. Jiu Xia smiled. The divine abilities of soul cultivators are not something we can guess. Flying in the air is far safer than hiding in the Ming Mountains. Modification? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. However, when he saw Jiu Xia smiling as she took out some clothes that didn't look strange, he came to a realization. According to what I know, within these millions of Ming Mountains, there are not only those weird-looking savages. There are still some people who look normal to us, Jiu Xia said with a smile. I collected these clothes in my early years. They're similar to those worn by soul cultivators, right? Not to mention Xiao Hua, even Xiao Mao, after looking at the clothes in Jiu Xia's hands, couldn't believe what Jiu Xia said. After all, Jiu Xia's ability to predict the future was too powerful. Xiao Mao almost thought that Jiu Xia had predicted that they would definitely enter Million Men Ming Mountains. Let's just wear it. Fairy Hong Xia was not suspicious at all. She took the clothes from Jiu Xia and said, Didn't you see that knight's rein? His clothes are also different from ordinary sword cultivators. What he's wearing should be what soul cultivators usually wear. When everyone changed into their clothes, they were all elated. Li Zongbao and the others were wearing jackets on their upper bodies and ordinary trousers on their lower bodies. However, the trousers were shorter than the ordinary ones, exposing their feet and calves. Furthermore, he was wearing something that looked like a sack on his head, which made him look very strange. Fairy Hong Xia's clothes were different. She was wearing a beautiful red robe with many folds. On the folds there were patterns of nymphs and eggs. Although the patterns were strange, the colors were colorful. Coupled with the green skirt and the exposed snow-white calves, it was exceptionally beautiful. Good. Seeing Fairy Hong Xia finish changing, Jiu Xia clapped her hands and laughed. Big sister, after changing into these clothes, you look very similar to Ji-Man and Hun Stockade. You're incomparably beautiful. After saying that, she slapped her forehead and took out a red flower crown from her storage pouch. She called out, Big sister, don't forget this. As she said that, she put it on Fairy Hong Xia's head. The flowers on the flower crown were extraordinarily beautiful. Together with Fairy Hong Xia's snow-white skin, a strange kind of beauty arose spontaneously. Good, Xiao Mao praised. Senior sister, after dressing up, you look even more beautiful than before. If the soul cultivators in Million Ming Mountains were even 10% as beautiful as you, the cultivators of Dao's sect would not see them as barbarians. What's Ji-Man? Li Zongbao glanced at Fairy Hong Xia and asked Jiu Xia. Also, is Hun Stockade a place where soul cultivators gather? Oh? These, you don't know? Jiu Xia was slightly surprised. Fairy Hong Xia's face was flushed with shyness. She said in a low voice, We came to Million Ming Mountains based on the records of our clan's Yuzhong. We thought it would be like the 10 perilous lands in the 3 kingdoms of cultivators. We could either use our cultivation to force our way in, or secretly follow the route recorded by our ancestors. But we didn't expect that soul cultivators would fight with sword cultivators. We also didn't expect. I understand now. Actually, you didn't prepare well. I'm afraid you used the opportunity of the Dao Sword War to come to Million Ming Mountains, right? Jiu Xia said with a smile before Fairy Hong Xia could finish. That's true. Fairy Hong Xia pursed her lips and smiled. Besides, the soul cultivators in Million Ming Mountains are really far away from our Shi Kingdom. We can't meet them normally. The records of our clan are missing. Fairy Hong Xia stopped talking. Xiao Hua knew that even if the Kai clan of Qin Yan had a complete record, Fairy Hong Xia might not be able to see it. Actually, I don't know much about Million Ming Mountains, Jiu Xia said with a smile. It's just that I've always liked to hunt for novelties. I've read a lot of ancient books, so I know a little about it. As she said that, Jiu Xia stretched out her little finger and made a small fingernail. The crescent moon on the fingernail was unusually beautiful. Then tell me, Fairy Hong Xia said with a smile. Save us the trouble of not knowing what Million Meng Mountains looks like after coming here. Million Meng Mountains is huge. As for how big it is, no one seems to know. The corners of Jiu Xia's mouth curled up slightly, and he seemed very pleased with himself. He said, But on the side adjacent to the sword domain, there are many natives gathered. Everyone has seen how these natives look like before. They are the kind that fight with swordsmen. These natives are different from sword cultivators and cultivators. They're born with the power of soul cultivators. Almost every one of them is a soul warrior. It's just that the distance they can go on the path of soul cultivation is different. All of the natives live in a village. This village is called the Soul Village. Actually, according to the records, soul cultivators are not called soul villages, but shaman villages. Among the natives living in shaman villages, not all of them are uncivilized. After so many years, many of them have learned etiquette, shame, and how to cultivate. Those who walk in front of the ordinary natives are called shamans or soul warriors. In the battle we saw earlier, the commander should be the so-called shamans. These shamans are the real soul cultivators. Every shaman village naturally has a leader, just like the clan leader of a Taoist family or the head of a sect. They're called shaman elders. Shaman elders have supreme authority in the shaman village and can do whatever they want. No one can control them, Jiu Xia said again. Besides shaman elders, the most respected person in the entire shaman village is Ji-Man. This Ji-Man is usually the daughter of shaman elders. If shaman elders don't have a daughter, they have to appoint a woman to be Ji-Man. Eh? Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously. Since Ji-Man is the most respected person besides shaman elders, then what happens after shaman elders die? Or the next generation shaman elders? Hee, who told you that shaman elders have to be a man? Jiu Xia laughed. Shaman elders can also be a woman. Oh, so. Ji-Man became shaman elders when she grew old. Xiaohua suddenly understood, but then he asked again. Shaman elders are women, Ji-Man is also a woman, then where did they come from? What about Ji-Man's father? Hee, I didn't say that shaman elders have to be a woman? Jiu Xia said slyly again. Shaman elders have both males and females. The male baby that Ji-Man gives birth to will be shaman elders in the future. The female baby that Ji-Man gives birth to will be Ji-Man in the future. When Ji-Man grows up, she naturally has to find Fu-Man. The child of Fu-Man and Ji-Man is shaman elder or Ji-Man. When shaman elder grows up, he naturally has to find Fu-Ji. The daughter of shaman elder and Fu-Ji is shaman elder or Ji-Man. Jiu Xia's words were like the tinkling of a clear spring. What Ji-Man, Fu-Man, Fu-Ji, shaman elder? Although Xiaohua heard it very pleasing to the ear, his mind was already in a mess. He was already vague about the seniority, and now he was even more confused. But Jiu Xia still didn't let them go, and continued. Also, I heard that in some inner village, that Ji-Man is even more important than shaman elders. Ji-Man's daughter, stop. Xiaohua didn't wait for Jiu Xia to finish, and hurriedly waved his hand and said, Please, whatever they do in the shaman village has nothing to do with us. They can do whatever they want. Ha! Jiu Xia covered her mouth and laughed, almost rocking back and forth. What else? Fairy Hong Xia also covered her mouth and laughed, then asked. Unexpectedly, looking at everyone's questions, Jiu Xia said in a serious tone. There are other things, I don't know. That's all? Xiao Mao couldn't believe it, and blurted out. Yes. Jiu Xia shook her head and said. When I saw this, my head felt like it was going to explode, so I didn't continue reading. You didn't make a copy of the jade slip? Xiao Mao asked with a look of disappointment on his face. The millions of soul cultivators in Ming Mountain are really far away from Xi. Normally, we can't even meet. Why would I make a copy of this jade slip? Jiu Xia imitated Fairy Hong Xia's words and said word by word. -11. Chapter 2808. Looking at Jiu Xia's adorable face and her slightly strange eyes, how could Xiao Mao blame her? Forget it, let's go! Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, This shaman village has nothing to do with us anyway. We just need to follow the previous route and slowly find, it's all there is to it. Hee hee. Jiu Xia held Fairy Hong Xia's arm and both of them landed on the mountain range. Li Zongbao and the other two landed in front of them. The place where the five of them landed was a vague mountain path with some soil and sand. However, the place where they landed was soft and seemed to be unusually damp. This Million Meng Mountains is indeed a little strange. Xiao Hua looked down and squatted down. He raised his hand and grabbed a handful of soil to examine. This soil was extremely loose, it seemed to be in the form of granules. Every slightly larger granule had some faint green color, it seemed to be moss, but also like green plants. As for the sand mixed in the soil, it also flickered with a faint green color, it seemed that there were some crystal grains within. However, when Xiaohua's divine sense swept over it, there were no fluctuations, it was just ordinary sand. Big brother, what are you doing? Xiao Mao did not land on the ground, but stood in the void and asked in confusion. Nothing. I just saw the withered branches all over the mountain and saw that the soil was very damp. I felt strange. Xiao Hua threw away the soil and sand in his hand and stood in the air. He clapped his hands and said calmly, The trees should be lush in a damp place. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Xiao Mao did not ask any more questions. After all, cultivators already knew a lot about spiritual herbs. How could they know about agriculture? However, Jiu Xia, who was flying behind the group, trembled violently and a strange look flashed across her eyes. Fairy Hong Xia naturally felt Jiu Xia's strange movement, and turned to look at her strangely. However, Jiu Xia only smiled sweetly and did not explain anything. The group flew slowly for 2 hours and did not meet any soul cultivators, nor did they encounter any danger. The faint path under their feet became more obvious, and beside the path, there were more withered plants. Unlike the mountain ranges in the kingdom of Xi, these millions of Meng mountains did not have a lot of green grass. Instead, they were filled with thorns that stuck to the ground and stuck close to the ground. These thorns had some thorns, but at the same time, there were also some green leaves. Among the green leaves, there were even some fruits that were smaller than grains of sand. There weren't many large trees in the mountain range. Occasionally, there would be some trees that were slightly taller, but they were not taller than a foot. The tree trunks were extremely thick, and there were many branches on the tree trunks. However, these branches were somewhat dry, and were faintly dyed with a withered yellow color. At this moment, the sky was already bright. Behind them, a wisp of white appeared on the horizon. The sun was about to rise from the horizon. Eh? The rotation of day and night in this place has returned to normal? Xiao Hua turned his head and gazed towards the east, suddenly coming to a realization. Aya, brother-in-law! Jiu Xia rebuked. We've already flown very far from here from the sword-edged peak of the sword domain. In terms of direction, we're leaning towards the southwest, so we're naturally far away from the extreme north of the sword domain. Where is the polar night and polar day? Oh, so it's called polar night and polar day. Xiao Hua nodded his head. It sounds quite similar. Of course. Jiu Xia curled her lips, no longer paying any attention to Xiao Hua, this directionally challenged idiot. Everyone continued to fly forward. When the sun rose, the road beneath their feet and what they could see with their naked eyes didn't change much. These millions of Meng mountains were really big. Although they didn't fly with all their strength, after flying for nearly 2 hours, they could only see continuous hills rising and falling one after another. There were also endless peaks in front of them, as if there was no end to it. Chirp, chirp! A few sharp cries came from the valley to their right. With a sweep of his divine sense, Xiao Hua saw a few wild beasts that were slightly bigger than hamsters burrowing out from the ground of the valley. They were extremely fast as they skimmed through the sand and rushed to the front of those withered plants. They stuffed their heads out to look around, then opened their mouths and bit onto those tiny fruits. Chirp, chirp! A few more cries rang out. Not far from these wild beasts, a few more similar beasts appeared. They were also burrowing out at an extremely fast speed, but their target was a few short plants. These few plants were only as tall as a palm, and there were 2 strands of something that looked like wheat growing on them. Those things were also withered, but these wild beasts didn't mind biting them in half, then opened their mouths and carefully ate them. With these wild beasts, I'm afraid there will be natives or soul warriors appearing soon. While thinking, Xiaohua slowly released his Buddhist sense. However, after releasing it for a few miles, he found something strange. He immediately retracted his Buddhist sense, then looked at Li Zongbao, who had been silent all this time, and said, "Senior brother, there are a few millions of natives in Ming Mountains ahead. How should we deal with them?" Since entering the millions of Ming Mountains, Li Zongbao didn't speak anymore, as if he had something on his mind. Now that Xiaohua asked him about it, he raised his eyebrows and looked at Jiuxia, who was flying behind him. "You should ask the ubiquitous Miss Jiuxia about this. We are ignorant and inexperienced, how can we know?" Actually, Jiuxia looked ahead and said in a low voice, "We should go and meet them. After all, there will be more natives in the future. However, at the very beginning, it's better for us to hide ourselves." After saying that, Jiuxia pulled Fairy Hongxia and flew to the side of the mountain path. With a wave of her hand, a strange light flashed, and the 2 of them disappeared. "Oh right, I heard that the millions of natives in Ming Mountains, no matter if they are soul warriors or not, can sense the aura of living people. If you want to avoid them early, you should also stay far away from the mountain path." Jiuxia's giggling voice was far away from where they disappeared. "Let's hide first." Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao and said in a low voice, "Actually, we don't need to prepare for this." Li Zongbao hesitated for a moment, then said, "We should speed up and fly low. Doesn't junior sister have the route in the jade amulet? We won't meet these natives." Jiuxia might have her reasons for doing this. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "The situation in Ming Mountains is different from before. It's better to be cautious. The millions of soul cultivators in Ming Mountains have pushed the front line into Huan Kingdom. Now that we're already within the millions of Ming Mountains, we're right behind those soul cultivators. There's no need to be so cautious." Xiao Mao said in an unconvinced tone. "Let's wait and see." Xiaohua was still very impressed with Jiuxia's ability, so he could only wave his hand and say. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao naturally had invisibility talismans. After flying far away from the mountain path, they casually activated them and their figures slowly disappeared. Xiaohua was beside them, also using invisibility talismans. After half a meal's time, several natives similar to the ones they saw before appeared in their field of vision. These aborigines held wooden poles in their hands. Their stature varied, but they were all dark and skinny. Their dark skin didn't have any patterns like the aborigines who were fighting. However, their exposed waists and abdomens were clearly protruding ribs. Their thin and skinny legs didn't seem to have any flesh, only a layer of skin. Furthermore, there was a skull wrapped in a layer of skin. It looked very frightening. As these natives got closer and closer, a burst of unintelligible whimpering sounds came from the distance. Moreover, these natives were constantly gesturing, as if they were arguing about something. When these natives were about to pass by the place where Xiaohua and the others were flying, they all stopped at the same time and looked around inexplicably. Their noses were even twitching as they pointed in all directions. Suddenly, these natives' skeleton-like faces showed joy at the same time. They turned towards the direction of Xiaohua and the others and threw out the wooden poles in their hands almost at the same time. 4 to 5 wooden poles drew beautiful arcs in the air and landed between the vines of the mountain path about 100 zhang away. The wooden poles' heads pierced deeply into the mountain path, and the entire wooden pole was still shaking in the air. Wah-wah. The natives let out strange cries and quickly rushed over from the mountain path. Each of them bared their fangs and brandished their claws, looking extremely terrifying. When these natives arrived at the place where the wooden poles were, they each reached out and pulled out their own wooden poles from the ground. Among the 5 wooden poles, 3 of the sharp points were poked into the mouse-like wild animals that Xiao Hua and the others had seen before. At this moment, these wild animals were still struggling, powerlessly twisting on the sharp points of the wooden poles. Black and red blood dripped down the wooden poles. The 3 natives who picked up the wooden poles reached out and grabbed the wild animals in their hands. They held them tightly and then greedily stuck out their tongues, licking the blood that was still flowing from the sharp points of the wooden poles. After licking the wooden poles clean, the natives raised their hands again. Their mouths were at the places where the wild animals were poked by the wooden poles, and they sucked with all their strength. Traces of blood seeped out from the natives' mouths, looking extremely terrifying and disgusting. The wooden poles of the other 2 natives were empty. Clearly, they didn't catch any wild animals. The 2 natives looked at the 3 natives sucking the blood of the wild animals with envy. Then, they squatted down and carefully looked at the thorny vines. Then, they carefully picked the small fruits from the vines. They took out a few fruits and put them in their mouths to chew, and kept the others in their bosoms. Gee gee goo goo goo. The 2 natives chewed and said a few strange words to each other. Then, they said a few words to the other 3 natives. It seemed like they were saying goodbye. Then, the 2 natives left and walked on the mountain path, heading into the distance. After drinking the blood, the 3 of them looked very satisfied. One of them even opened his mouth, revealing his white teeth, and bit off the wild animal's head. Crunching sounds could be heard as he chewed it in his mouth. The native also drank the blood that flowed out from the decapitated head. The 3 natives held the wild animals in their hands and looked around for a moment before returning to the mountain path. However, they didn't chase after the 2 natives. Instead, they turned back and went back to where they came from. -11. Chapter 2809. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the figures of Xiao Hua and the other 4 appeared not far away. The 5 of them had different expressions. Xiao Hua and the others had a look of disbelief on their faces. Even Xiao Mao's face was a little pale, and there was an unconcealable strangeness in his eyes. Fairy Hongxia bit her lips tightly and frowned. She had an extremely disgusted look on her face. Jiuxia's eyes were bright as he looked at the dried-up blood on the ground. No one knew what he was thinking about. "Let's go!" Li Zongbao's face was calm as he said. "These millions of people of Meng Mountain are indeed uncivilized. This is obviously a common wild rat. Even the people of the secular world might not eat it raw. They actually ate it so directly. Sigh, I wonder if they will eat people." Xiao Hua's heart was also disgusted. If it was any other wild animal, it would be fine. But this rat's appearance was really unbearable. He really could not imagine that someone would eat a rat raw. Looking at Xiao Mao's somewhat panicked expression and his pale face, Xiao Hua did not ask anything. He knew that he had never seen such a disgusting scene. The 5 of them did not say anything after that. They quietly hurried on. Obviously, their flying speed had increased. They all wanted to leave the place where the natives gathered. However, on the mountain path, there were more and more natives. Xiao Hua and the others had to avoid them from time to time. Although they did not see any wild rats being eaten raw, Xiao Hua and the others were still somewhat impatient. But when they looked at Jiu Xia, he still seemed to know what was going on and was not in a hurry. Seeing this scene, Xiao Hua was really puzzled. He could not understand what Jiu Xia was planning. The sun was getting higher and higher. It was already close to noon. The 5 of them had only flown for about 200 miles at the speed of a turtle. And within their divine sense, Xiao Hua and the others saw about 20 people rushing towards them. They had no choice but to avoid them. At this moment, the sun was about to reach the top of their heads. Under the direct sunlight, an indescribable heat was born from the bottom of their hearts. Although Xiao Hua had an invisibility talisman on his body, there was an indescribable feeling of irritation in his heart. Those 20 or so people were the same as before. They all held wooden poles in their hands, and the wooden poles had a very sharp point. These people spoke very loudly. Although Xiao Hua and the others were separated by several tens of feet, they could still hear them clearly. They were also arguing about something. Although Xiao Hua couldn't understand what they were arguing about, Xiao Hua could tell from the expressions of these people. However, as they walked, one of them suddenly fell to the ground, and the wooden pole in his hand was thrown far away. Immediately after, the remaining natives were stunned. The noisy noises came to a halt as they stood there like nails, glaring at the person who had fallen to the ground. That person was lying on the ground, motionless. The sunlight shone on his dark skin, reflecting a bright color. Quack, 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 quack. One of the Aborigines suddenly spoke, causing a commotion among the Aborigines. Then, the Aborigines who spoke just now reached out and pulled up the Aborigines who were lying on the ground. The Aborigines who were lying on the ground weren't tall, and were also very thin. Being carried by the Aborigines, they were actually very light. Ao. Seeing that the Aborigines dragged the Aborigines across the mountain path and went to the mountain rocks far away from the mountain path, the remaining 10 or so Aborigines also cried out. Each of them waved their wooden poles and chased after the Aborigines. When everyone arrived at a depression, the Aborigines threw the Aborigines they were dragging onto a large boulder. The boulder was somewhat white from the sun's rays. When the Aborigines landed on it, their bodies trembled slightly, and they curled up as if they were awake. Even their eyes were slightly opened. However, they only opened for a moment, and then closed again. Woo 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 woo! The Aborigines who were standing at the side threw the Aborigines aside and waved their wooden poles around the boulder. As they waved, they mumbled something. Among the 10 or so Aborigines who were following closely behind, except for a few who were hesitant, the rest of them surrounded the wooden poles and began to dance. This strange situation only lasted for the time it took to brew a cup of tea before everyone's voices became softer. All the natives raised the wooden poles in their hands at almost the same time. The sharp ends of the wooden poles were pointed at the natives lying on the crouching ox rock. Just as Li Zongbao had guessed, they were really going to eat the Aborigines. However, at this moment, a series of chaotic noises came from the entire mountain range. The thorn-like withered branches on the slopes and ravines broke inch by inch into countless small segments. These small segments made strange noises under the bright afternoon sun, and the noises could be heard all over the mountain. Then, countless small segments floated in midair, and the withered segments actually grew to an inch long. They were all strange insects with pitch-black carapaces. As the strange insects flew up, countless inexplicable waves rippled throughout the entire millions of Ming Mountains. Xiao Hua and the others appeared in midair. Moreover, their bodies involuntarily fell towards the slope. Obviously, these waves had a very serious effect on their transcendence energy. Moreover, as Xiao Hua and the others appeared, countless strange insects began to fly towards the 5 of them, as if they were attracted by something. When the strange insects flew up, the Aborigines who wanted to eat the Aborigines didn't pay any attention to them, as if they were used to it. Moreover, the strange insects didn't pay any attention to these Aborigines. However, when Xiao Hua and the others appeared, these Aborigines were stunned. When the strange insects began to gather, these Aborigines' faces were filled with panic. "Sister, quickly use your innate true water!" Although Jiu Xia had landed on the ground, she didn't panic at all. Instead, she whispered to Fairy Hong Xia, "These are beetles that are unique to millions of Ming Mountains. They can produce strange waves that can break through cultivators' transcendence energy and swordsmen's sword energy. They can only detect innate objects." "All right." Fairy Hong Xia agreed, but she didn't activate her innate true water. She looked at Xiao Hua with a smile. Xiao Hua didn't dare to hesitate. Looking at the beetles that covered the entire mountain range, he also felt his scalp tingle. A pool of clear water emerged and enveloped the 5 of them. The strange ripples disappeared as soon as they entered the innate primordial water. The beetles that were charging over seemed to have not seen the innate primordial water. They began to circle around the area, and many beetles actually pounced on the natives. The Aborigines turned pale with fright. While making strange sounds from their mouths, they didn't have time to regenerate their cannibal meat. Instead, they waved their wooden poles and fled towards the mountain path. The Aborigines' pronunciation was very strange. It was really powerful. The beetles approached the Aborigines, but they didn't dare to get close to them. The Aborigines' soul cultivation didn't seem to be very strong, so they couldn't drive the beetles away. Therefore, while they were in a stalemate, they ran far away. On the contrary, the Aborigines who were lying quietly on the rock weren't attacked by the beetles. They were like sacrificial offerings placed on the rock. When the beetles were far away, Xiaohua pretended to keep the innate true water. Looking at the bare ground, he smiled bitterly and said, "I thought these plants had something to do with the soil. Who knew? They were just some strange insects. What a joke! Hee, brother-in-law wasn't wrong." Jiuxia laughed and said, "These beetles are insects in the afternoon, and vines in the morning." "Oh? There's such a strange thing." Xiaohua looked at the invisible beetles in the distance. He didn't dare to look at them with his divine sense, for fear of attracting them. Meanwhile, Li Zongbao looked at the man on the rock and said indifferently, "Aborigines, they are Aborigines. They are really eating humans. Jiuxia, are we still going to move forward like this?" Xiaohua frowned and looked at the man, then raised his head and asked, "Hee, brother-in-law, you have great magical powers. Of course, you can hide from the beetles' prying eyes, but we can't." Jiuxia smiled and said, "Even the innate true water is only useful against the beetles. If we fly deeper into the Ming Mountains, there will be more strange soul beasts. Even the innate true water can't hide the ripples of magic power. Can we just walk on the mountain path?" Xiaohua didn't understand. "Don't we also have ripples of magic power? It's not the same." Jiuxia laughed and said, "If you fly in the sky, you will be targeted by all. If you walk on the mountain path and don't use magic power or fly slowly, the chances of being discovered will be much smaller. Is that so?" Xiaohua looked at Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia shrugged her shoulders, indicating that she did not know either. Her shoulders that were exposed outside of her robe were very fair. "All right, that's the only way." Only now did Xiaohua feel the ferocious teeth of the Ming Mountains. No wonder it was a forbidden land for cultivators and swordsmen. Even Xiaohua was regretting that he had recklessly come to millions of Ming Mountains this time, and did not make any thorough preparations. If they hadn't met Jiuxia on the way, they would have been discovered by the Aborigines and even surrounded by the beetles. But soon, Xiaohua shook his head. There were very few cultivators who came to the Ming Mountains. Even swordsmen wouldn't come to the Ming Mountains for no reason. Even if he wanted to make any preparations, it wouldn't be easy. "Let's go!" Xiaohua waved his hand. Just as he was about to speak, he realized that Xiao Mao, who had a bad expression, had walked to the side of the rock and lowered his head to look at the Aborigine curled up on it. "Big brother." Just as Xiaohua was about to speak, Xiao Mao whispered, "This person isn't dead yet." "Yes, I know." Xiaohua nodded. "He just fainted." "But..." Xiao Mao's voice was lowered again. "How can we wake him up?" I just gave him a strand of magic power." Xiaohua was a little puzzled by Xiao Mao's actions. However, he still walked over and carefully observed for a while. He reached out his hand and placed it on the Aborigine's wrist. After a while, Xiaohua said calmly, "He fainted from hunger. It's better to give food than magic power." -11. Chapter 28:10. As he spoke, Xiaohua waved his hand and took out some grains, intending to put them into the Aborigine's mouth. "Brother-in-law, wait a moment!" Jiuxia had been watching attentively. When Xiaohua took out something, her eyes lit up. When she saw the thing in Xiaohua's hand, she seemed to have thought of something and quickly shouted, "This thing, the Aborigine can't eat it!" "Oh? Why?" Xiaohua held a small handful of grains in his hand and was a little stunned. "This is the rice that the mortals often eat. These Aborigines should be able to eat it too, right?" "Brother-in-law, you don't know!" Jiuxia's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile as she explained. "The food that these Aborigines eat is from the millions of Ming Mountains. That's why their physique and cultivation are different from ours. This rice is a food in the cultivation world, but in the millions of Ming Mountains, it might be a poison. I think it's better if brother-in-law doesn't give it to him. Then, what do these aborigines eat? Xiaohua helplessly put away the fine seeds and asked while releasing his divine sense. It seems like the millions of Meng Mountains aborigines eat millet. Jiuxia, who always knew everything, was a little hesitant. If it's blood food, then it's wild animals. Oh, the fruits of those beetles before they turn into worms can also be eaten by the aborigines. The beetles have already turned into worms, how can they? Xiao Mao was a little helpless and also released his divine sense. Sigh, wait a moment. Xiaohua sighed and flew down the hill, burrowing into the ground. Not long after, he came out with a wild animal that looked like a mouse. When he returned to the side of the big rock, he threw the wild animal to Xiao Mao and said, "You can do it yourself." "All right." Xiao Mao took the wild animal without hesitation and poked it with his hand. A stream of blood flowed out from the wild animal's neck. When Xiao Mao put the wild animal near the aborigine's mouth, the blood flowed into the aborigine's mouth. Just as Xiaohua said, when the blood entered the aborigine's mouth, the aborigine's throat moved and swallowed mouthful by mouthful. Brother-in-law is really amazing. It is said that this item is hidden several hundred feet deep in the mountains. It is very difficult for ordinary people to find it. Brother-in-law, you were able to catch it on your first trip. This little sister admires you. Although Jiuxia said that she admired Xiaohua, when she looked at Xiao Mao, she was not surprised that Xiaohua had this ability. Instead, she was curious why Xiao Mao was so meddlesome. Actually, Jiuxia was not the only one who was surprised. Even Xiaohua, Li Zongbao, and Fairy Hongxiao were surprised. This was because along the way, Xiao Mao had always followed suit. Whatever the others did, he would do. Whatever the others asked him to do, he would do it. He had never been so proactive before. Moreover, it was the life of an uncivilized native. After drinking the wild rat's blood, the native seemed to have regained his strength. He rolled his eyes a few times and tried to open them, but the strong sunlight made it impossible for him to open his eyes. Just as the native tilted his neck slightly, Xiao Mao placed the wild rat into his mouth again. The aborigine bit down on the wild rat. He stretched out his powerless hand and grabbed the wild rat. He greedily and eagerly chewed on it without opening his eyes again. "Let's go. He should have come back to life," Li Zongbao said indifferently. "Before he wakes up, we should leave as soon as possible." Li Zongbao was worried that this native would wake up and summon other natives, so he urged, "Senior brother, please wait a moment." Xiao Mao raised his head and responded with a strange look. He did not have any intention of leaving. Since he did not want to leave, the others could only wait patiently. After a while, the native finished eating the wild rat. He licked his lips and opened his eyes. When he saw Xiao Mao and the others clearly, his face revealed an extremely respectful expression. His legs were slightly bent, his hands were placed in front of his chest, and his mouth was mumbling some strange words. Needless to say, this native had obviously treated Xiao Mao and the others as spirit warriors. He was saying some words of thanks. When Xiaohua heard this, he was surprised. The native's words were similar to the Green Seal's script, but there was a huge difference. Naturally, he would not say it. Therefore, Xiaohua turned his gaze to Jiuxia. He did not know if this little girl who claimed to know everything knew the language of millions of Ming mountains. However, Jiuxia did not pay any attention to Xiaohua. Instead, she looked at Xiao Mao. What shocked Xiaohua the most was that Xiao Mao was actually speaking to the native. Xiaohua blinked his eyes and looked at Xiao Mao in disbelief. He could not believe that Xiao Mao could speak the language of millions of Ming mountains. Not to mention Xiaohua, Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxiao were also stunned. Their gazes were somewhat dazed. On the other hand, Jiuxia's expression was still calm. She seemed to be a little surprised, but it quickly disappeared. However, when she heard Xiao Mao's words, he was stuttering at the beginning. His face was even flushed red and he could not say anything. However, gradually, his words became more fluent. Although it was not as fluent as the native, it was obvious that the native understood him. Furthermore, his face became more and more respectful. In the end, the native actually raised his head to the sky and raised his hands above his head. Woo-woo-ya-ya, he said a lot more. Then, he respectfully bowed to Xiao Mao again and pressed his forehead tightly against Xiao Mao's toes. Xiao Mao. What's going on? Xiao Hua was stuttering at this moment. He really did not understand. This strange situation was even more strange than when he saw Jiu Xia come to Hun country to look for him. Sigh. When Xiao Mao heard Xiao Hua's question, an awkward expression appeared on his face. He looked at the native who was kneeling in front of him, and seemed to be ashamed. He sighed and said, "Big brother, didn't I tell you before? When little brother was young, mother had taught little brother a local language, but little brother never paid much attention to it. But today, after listening to the language spoken by these millions of natives of Ming Mountain, it is very similar to the local language taught by mother. Although they are not exactly the same, but they can understand what little brother is saying, and little brother can also understand what they are saying." "Ah? So that's why." Xiao Hua was enlightened. He turned to look at Li Zongbao. What Xiao Mao said was the truth. Before entering Hun country, Xiao Mao had confessed this matter. However, everyone had noticed Xiao Mao's encounter and his mother's matter. No one cared about the local language that Xiao Mao's mother taught him. However, this local language was the most important thing. Then, Xiao Hua came to a realization. Since Xiao Mao's mother was a native of Ming Mountain, it was normal for his soul to have a green seal script talisman. Looks like Xiao Mao, his background is not ordinary. Xiao Hua saw that the native was kneeling on the ground and did not get up. His hands were even grabbing Xiao Mao's leg and not letting go. Xiao Hua was puzzled and asked, "What are you talking about? What is he doing?" "That, big brother," Xiao Mao answered unwillingly. "He is inviting me to their Wu stockade. Why would he invite you?" Xiao Hua was even more puzzled. "He doesn't know you?" "That," Xiao Mao said awkwardly. He said that I am the descendant of great god Shibai and their master." "Damn it, you are so honorable?" Xiao Hua laughed. "How did he know? Could it be that Jiu Xia gave you clothes? Why didn't he come find me?" As he spoke, Xiao Hua tugged at his collar and looked down curiously. "Big brother, don't mock me." Xiao Mao's face was red. "I really didn't expect that. I am a native of Meng Mountain. This man is called Xieqi. His words are similar to what I said, but they are definitely different. He knew that I am the descendant of some great god Shibai from what I said." "Oh, no wonder." Xiao Hua immediately understood why Xiao Mao's mother didn't teach him anything but this language when he was young. It turned out that this language was a symbol of status, a representation of honorable status. When he thought of the painstaking efforts of Xiao Mao's mother, Xiao Hua's heart was filled with melancholy. Although Xiao Mao's parents had passed away, he knew his own origin and had come to his homeland. But what about himself? Where was his origin? What was the situation of his parents? Cough, cough, Xiao Mao. When he thought of this, Xiao Hua coughed twice and said, "A person's origin is not something he can choose. But he can choose his own life. He doesn't need to feel ashamed of his origin, and he doesn't need to feel proud of his origin. His origin is given by his parents. No matter if it is lowly or honorable, it is all his own, and it exists. The most important thing is still himself. This is the path he has to walk in the future. Only when you understand your own origin and understand your own path, will you be able to walk further in the future. That way, you won't have any more knots in your heart." "Yes, big brother is right." Xiao Mao looked at Xiao Hua. When he heard Xiao Hua's words that struck his heart, he had mixed feelings. Before this, he had thought about the origin of his parents more than once, and also hypothesized about his own origin more than once. But he had never thought that he would be the same as these uncivilized soul cultivators of Ming Mountains. Not only did these natives of Meng Mountains have no etiquette, not only did they have no face, they even ate wild rats alive. What made him most ashamed was that these natives ate other natives. When he thought about how these natives were actually of the same origin as him, Xiao Mao wanted to drill into the ground of Meng Mountains and never meet Xiao Hua and the others again. This was too shameful. He couldn't make up for it. In fact, when the first group of aborigines walked past them, he had already heard the meaning of their conversation. He already knew that he had something to do with them. He had been holding it in all this time, trying to hide this matter. But in the end, when the unconscious Jie was about to be eaten by the natives, he didn't plan to do anything. He was deeply ashamed of it. He closed his eyes and prayed that these things would pass quickly, but when Xiao Hua told him to leave, he hesitated again. After all, Jie was a human life, and he was lying in front of him. This was someone who said the same thing as him. Especially when Xiao Mao thought about his journey. It was as if an invisible hand had sent him to Mount Million Meng. He could even feel his mother's aura. It was as if it was his mother who had pushed him to Mount Million Meng. If he ignored Xie Qi, who might be a clansman, could he face his dead mother? -11. Chapter 28:11. This was also the reason why Xiao Mao saved Jie Xiu. However, what he thought and what he did were completely different from what he faced in reality. Facing Xiao Hua, Li Zongbao, and Fairy Hong Xia, who came from a Taoist clan and sect, Xiao Mao felt inferior and less shameless for no reason. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Xiao Mao took a deep breath and nodded. Million Mountain Meng is mother and father's home, so it's naturally my home as well. Little brother might be able to find the footsteps of father and mother here. That's right. Xiao Hua smiled. If you want to find the roots of your parents, you naturally have to follow Jie Xiu. Otherwise, how would you know who great god Shibai is? Where are your parents originally? Little brother naturally knows that this is the best way. Xiao Mao smiled bitterly. But little brother is now a Taoist cultivator. Big brother and the others don't understand Million Mountain Meng. Once we meet the soul warriors of Wu Village, we'll be exposed. This is extremely risky. That's true. Xiao Hua hesitated. It's fine. Seeing Xiao Hua hesitate, Jiu Xia smiled. Now that you're their master, how can they make decisions for their master's actions? Didn't you see how that night rain could enter Million Mountain Meng? Maybe it's related to some descendant. Now that there are cultivators who secretly learn from soul warriors, there are naturally cultivators who practice soul arts. Perhaps, your parents went to the state of Shi specifically to cultivate the Tao sect's magic arts. In my opinion, nothing will happen. Even Jiu Xia, who claimed to be omniscient, gave her assurance. Xiao Mao also nodded. However, when Xiao Hua heard Jiu Xia call him master, he felt inexplicably uncomfortable, as if he didn't like this title. Moreover, Xiao Hua was also somewhat puzzled. Looking at Jiu Xia's actions, it was obvious that she wanted Xiao Mao to go to Wu Village to find out his origins. Could it be Jiu Xia's goal, or she has something to do with Million Mountain Meng? Xiao Hua was suddenly startled and looked meaningfully at the smiling Jiu Xia. That smile that was even more brilliant than spring flowers was truly reflected in his eyes and heart. The person she's looking for in Huan country, is Xiao Mao? It's not me? Or did Jiu Xia find Xiao Mao through me? Although Xiao Hua's karmic hand had not made any progress, he had gained some understanding of the Tao of Karma. Seeing that Fairy Hong Xia was supposed to come to millions of Ming mountains, and Xiao Mao, who was supposed to be a training ground, had appeared, he naturally knew that Xiao Mao had become the main character of this trip to millions of Ming mountains. With Jiu Xia's ability, he must have figured out that the person he was looking for was Xiao Mao, and not Xiao Hua. Doesn't she feel disappointed? She had always wanted my help and ignored Xiao Mao. Now that she realized that Xiao Mao was the person she should be looking for, shouldn't she be looking for Xiao Mao instead? Why hasn't her expression changed? Xiao Hua thought to himself. Sure enough, When he saw Xiaohua looking at him, Jiu Xia slightly turned his eyes, and his left eyelid actually blinked a few times at Xiaohua. Wow! Xiaohua hurriedly turned his head. Every blink was like a bolt of lightning striking his heart. His delicate little heart, he should leave it for Fairy Hong Xia. Damn, I forgot! Xiaohua was stunned. Xiao Mao calls me big brother. Doesn't Xiao Mao have to listen to whatever I say? If she finds me, isn't that the same as finding Xiao Mao? However, when Xiaohua turned his head, he saw Xiao Mao's gaze. Obviously, Xiao Mao had the same thought as him. He still wanted to listen to his opinion. Go! Xiaohua could still stop him if he took it. This was the best opportunity for Xiao Mao to find his origin, and he had no reason to stop him. As for the dangers inside, Xiaohua believed that with his cultivation base and the little white dragon in the mysterious dark clouds, there shouldn't be any big problems. Moreover, there was also Jiu Xia who needed Xiao Mao's help. When Xiao Mao saw that Xiaohua had agreed, his face was immediately filled with joy. He nodded and muttered a few words to the one called Jiu Xia. When the strange words came out from Xiao Mao's mouth, they were different from what the millions of natives of Meng Mountain said. There were even some pleasant syllables, like the chirping of birds. Unfortunately, other than the vague syllables of Jiu Xia, Xiaohua couldn't understand anything else. The native called Jiu Xia suddenly jumped up from the ground, giving Xiaohua a fright. Then, he saw that the native's face was filled with tears. Some were crying, some were laughing, and some were dancing around Xiao Mao in a strange way. Where was the miserable state that he had just fainted? Xiao Mao smiled bitterly, looking at Xiaohua and the others helplessly. However, there was a sense of pride in his eyes. Xiaohua naturally knew that this was a ceremony of the natives to express their respect and joy. Only after the native finished the ceremony, with sweat dripping from his forehead, did he respectfully use the thumb and index finger of his right hand to pinch Xiao Mao's lapel. On the sleeves of Xiaohua and the others, there was something similar to a tassel, and it fell into the hands of Jiu Xia. Jiu Xia raised the tassel to his forehead, then carefully bent his waist and walked in front of Xiao Mao, as if he was leading the way. However, when Xiaohua saw that Jiu Xia was having a hard time walking, as if he was walking sideways, and didn't even dare to raise his head, Xiaohua was really worried for him. However, when the native looked at Xiao Mao, his eyes were filled with pride and respect, as if it was his life's honor to lead the way for Xiao Mao. All of a sudden, Xiaohua felt a little absent-minded. Wasn't it the same when Fei Yunshu, Zhongzhan, and the others saw him in the past? Although Jiu Xia was leading the way, Xiaohua and the others' journey was much slower. This wasn't the worst. After walking for about 10 miles, they heard the roar of beasts from afar. Even the slightly soft ground under their feet started to shake. Oh! Xiaohua stared blankly for a moment before carefully releasing his Buddhist sense. But after a few kilometers, he could see that on the mountain path ahead of him, there were a dozen or so large soul beasts. Under the control of a dozen or so soul warriors, they were madly charging towards him. Behind the soul warriors, there were several hundred natives that looked just like Jiyue. In their hands, they held all kinds of strange-looking wooden staves as they rushed forward in a frenzy. Xiao Mao saw them as well. Lowering his head, he said a few words to Jiu Xia. Jiu Xia respectfully replied with a few words. Xiao Mao turned his head and smiled. Big brother, it's fine. Jiu Xia said that the soul warriors from the stronghold are coming. It's probably those natives that saw us suddenly appear and rushed back to report it. Amen, it's fine. Xiaohua nodded. The soul beasts ran very fast. In a short moment, they appeared in everyone's field of vision. At this time, Xiao Mao and Jiu Xia were walking on top of a mountain. The soul warriors controlled their soul beasts to see Xiao Mao's clothes, then to see the revived Jiu Xia, and Jiu Xia's incomparably respectful appearance. They couldn't help but be stunned. One by one, the soul beasts stopped at the bottom of the mountain. They were stunned. Ji woo woo! Jiu Xia raised his head and shouted. His voice traveled very far and every word was said in a loud voice. It was very different from what the cultivators of the Taoist sect usually said. Damn it, it seems like the words of millions of Ming mountains are used to shout. Xiaohua smiled and looked at Li Zongbao. The two of them stopped and quietly watched. Hearing Qiu Xia's shout, the dozen or so soul warriors were extremely shocked. In an instant, the shock disappeared and was replaced by ecstasy. The dozen or so soul warriors exchanged a few words with each other. Two of them jumped down from their soul beasts. Just like Qiu Xia, they bowed to Xiao Mao and then jumped back onto their soul beasts. They urged their soul beasts to turn around and fly away. Clearly, they were going back to the shaman's stronghold to inform the other soul warriors. The remaining dozen or so soul warriors also jumped down from their soul beasts and drove their soul beasts to the side of the mountain path. They bent their bodies, bent their legs, and raised their hands high. They were extremely careful as they welcomed Xiao Mao. When they arrived in front of Xiao Mao, they surrounded Xiao Mao as if they were sobbing. They raised their arms and legs and actually started to dance. Xiao Mao smiled. Seeing the joy in the eyes of these soul warriors and the longing expression on their faces, he felt an indescribable warmth from the bottom of his heart. He opened his mouth very naturally. Although it was a mouthful, the words he said were pleasant to the ears. When the soul warriors heard this, they became even crazier. It was as if they had eaten a spirit herb that boosted their sex drive. They danced even more vigorously. Damn it, senior brother, Xiao Mao came to the right place this time. Xiaohua looked at Xiao Mao and turned to Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao nodded indifferently. His expression was somewhat cold. Compared to the excitement in front, everyone felt that he was an outsider. Xiaohua slightly raised his eyes and looked at Li Zongbao with a strange expression. It seemed that after the Battle of the Sword Tomb, Li Zongbao's expression became slightly richer. From time to time, he could also smile. But now, Li Zongbao began to return to his previous indifference. He didn't care about anything anymore. Could it be? Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He thought of the Immortal Killing Whip. When the Immortal Killing Whip was still the Immortal Piercing Whip, Li Zongbao was cultivating the emotion-parting treasure mirror. He used the Immortal Piercing Whip to kill the 7 emotions and 6 desires of a cultivator. Later, it seemed that when the Immortal Piercing Whip was destroyed, his cultivation method was also affected? But now, could it be because the Immortal Slaying Whip had been repaired? Sometimes, good intentions may not be able to do good things. When Xiaohua thought of this, he couldn't help but feel some regret. If he hadn't repaired the Immortal Killing Whip, perhaps Li Zongbao would be better right now. Just as he was thinking, the hundreds of natives also appeared in the distance. Weren't the ones in front the ones who were preparing to eat Qiu Xia? However, at this time, there wasn't the slightest bit of shame on their faces. It seemed that they had already received the message from the 2 soul warriors. Each and every one of them had disbelief and ecstasy on their faces. However, when they saw the living Qiu Xia with their own eyes, as well as the respect of the dozen or so soul warriors, each and every one of them was overjoyed. 11. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.